Good afternoon. The Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning is calling this confirmation hearing and public hearing to order. It's Tuesday, May 7th, 2024. The time is now 1:05 p.m. In compliance with open government law, notices of today's public hearing were broadcasted on KUAM, provided via email to senators, stakeholders, and local media, and posted to the Government of Guam Notices website on April 30th for the 5-day notice and May 5th for the 48-hour notice. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that are here today: Senator Roy Kanata, Senator Terlaje, and Senator Tom Fisher. The purpose of this hearing is to hear the following agenda items. To receive testimony in the executive appointment of Marie P. Lizama to serve as Director of Department of Revenue and Taxation, to receive testimony on the executive appointment of Cynthia V. Ecube, Esquire, to serve as a member of the Board of Equalization. The third item of our agenda is to hear testimony on Bill 265-37 COR, sponsored by Speaker Therese Terlaje. It's an act to provide tax relief to property owners of R1 and A zones by deferring increases in property tax assessments resulting from the 2024-2025 island-wide property reevaluation. The fourth item on our agenda is to receive testimony on Bill 266-37 COR, sponsored by Speaker Therese Terlaje. It's an act to implement a gradual property tax increase for R1 and A zone properties following the 2024-2025 island-wide real property reevaluation to maintain affordability and stability in housing and food. At 4 o'clock, we will hear testimony on Bill 269-37 COR, sponsored by Senator Sabina, Flores, Perez, an act to add a new Article 2 to Chapter 53, Title 10 Guam Code Annotated, relative to standardizing, labeling, and testing of bottled water. Rules of conduct are as follows. Those called to testify will be in order, beginning with government agencies, and then followed by those who confirm in advance with my office on May 3rd, and then according to the sign-in sheet. To ensure all public comments are captured, I ask that all written testimonies be provided to my staff so they can be easily disseminated to the public and also incorporated into the committee report. When you're testifying, please state your name first, your organization and position if relevant. For record-keeping purposes, senators will be given an opportunity to ask questions of each panel. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance and nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to character or motive of any senator or person testifying is not permitted. So now to begin our agenda. To hear testimony on the executive appointment of the Acting Director Marie P. Lizama to serve as Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation at the pleasure of the Governor. The Department of Revenue and Taxation's mission is to apply and enforce licensing and taxation laws with integrity and fairness and encourage voluntary compliance by educating customers to enhance and maintain public confidence. The Director is responsible for the administration and performance of the following mandates, which are quite large. They include income tax administration, in order to enforce the Guam territorial income tax laws, general tax oversight, to administer and enforce a variety of general taxes as specified in Title 11, business licensing, which oversees the issuance and regulations of business licenses, vehicle registration, to manage all functions related to vehicle registration and licensing, alcoholic beverage control, to regulate all aspects of alcoholic beverage control, real property tax, to administer and enforce laws relating to the assessment and collection of real property taxes, business privilege taxes, to administer and collect taxes from businesses operating in Guam, excise taxes, implement and collect excise taxes on specific goods like tobacco, alcohol, and cannabis, gaming regulation, oversee and regulate gaming activities, cannabis regulation, manage and the legal framework for cannabis cultivation, distribution, and sale. There's much more. Weights and measures and enforcement, ensure accuracy in commercial measurements and safety for commercial vehicles. Bank savings and loans credit union regulation, to oversee bank savings and loan credit unions. Of course, we have a commissioner now, but this could be in the absence of a commissioner. Insurance regulation, also, we have a current commissioner, but the Director oversees this department to regulate the insurance industry. Securities oversight, to administer the Uniform Securities Act. Corporate regulation, enforce compliance with general corporation law. Tax preparers regulation, to regulate tax preparers to ensure they meet professional standards. Passport services, to provide passport acceptance services. Collection of public debt, to oversee the collection of all public debts owed to the government. Tax credits and incentives administration, to manage tax credits and incentives for economic growth. Enforcement of non-tax revenue laws. The examination branch, which conducts audits to ensure tax compliance and identify tax evasion. Criminal Investigation Division, investigate and support the prosecution of tax-related crimes. Tax collection, enhance efforts to collect due taxes and minimize defaults and evasion. Legal and regulatory compliance, ensure that all taxation practices comply with legal standards and that the department's actions are legally defensible. Driver's License Division, to oversee the issuance, renewal, and regulation of driver's licenses. So this is a huge, huge responsibility that the director holds, and we're here to provide the opportunity for testimony. And at this point, we do have one, basically the nominee herself, but there are others that have supplied written testimony in favor of Acting Director Marie Lizama. So is there anyone here that would like to provide testimony that hasn't indicated so at this time? Okay. All right. So otherwise, we are going to allow this opportunity for Acting Director Lizama. Marie, you're recognized.
Hafide and good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the 37th Guam Legislature, Senator Kanata, Senator Fisher, Madam Speaker, and Senator Taidagui. Thank you for the opportunity to provide my personal testimony. And also I'd like to thank my husband John, my son Dominic, members of my family, some of my closest friends, and my former director Daphne Shimizu. My name is Marie Lizama. I was appointed as the acting director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation by Governor Leon Guerrero upon the former director's departure from the agency. I humbly come before you today in the hope of getting confirmed to that position. I graduated from the University of Guam in 1995 with a Bachelor of Business Administration and Marketing degree. I was already employed in the travel industry and continued in that career until my retirement in 2018 after my employer, Delta Airlines, ceased its operations in Guam, Palau, and Saipan. I re-entered the workforce in early 2021 to lead the Business Services Unit at the Department of Labor. After several months there, I was asked by the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration to take on the Deputy Director position at the Department of Revenue and Taxation. It was a tough decision to make, especially since my work experience was almost entirely in the private sector. It was also daunting to know that I would help to lead an agency with compliance, taxation, and regulatory responsibilities, carrying out different mandates with 21 different branches, approximately 165 employees, and the important job of bringing in the majority of the government of Guam's general fund revenues. Not only was I new to public sector service, I didn't think I could actually take on the responsibilities of the deputy director position. After some thought, I decided to take on the challenge. I reasoned that if I was sincere in wanting to help, then I certainly shouldn't be selective as to where to do so. Additionally, I believed I was able to bring an outside perspective. Nearly 3 years later, I'm here before you, having gained more knowledge about the agency thanks to former Director Daphne Shimizu, the administrators, the supervisors, and the employees. There are others with more qualifications than I, and while there may not seem to be any similarity between the travel industry and public sector work, the skills I accumulated during my previous career have certainly proven useful in this government position. They include, but are not limited to, problem solving, employing sound fiscal practices, carrying out effective communication, and conducting service recoveries. I'm also a firm believer that education is essential. Taxpayers, customers, and even you the legislators, expect and deserve information in order to make informed decisions. Being a director is not easy. While I have never aspired to be one, I have been asked, and I am willing to continue to lead. There is undoubtedly more work that needs to be done. The dedicated DRT employees have endured and endure many things because they know the agency and its mission are vital to virtually all who call Guam home. They deserve stability and continuity in leadership. I humbly ask you to confirm my nomination so that I can continue to be their advocate, their voice, and their ear, and so that we can continue to work together for the people of Guam. Thank you.
Situ's Masi, Acting Director Marie Lizama, for your testimony. I noticed some people came in a little later. If anybody would like to provide testimony at this time? Okay. Well, feel free if you would like to, if you change your mind in the course of this. But at this point, then, we are going to open the floor for questions. I think, what's really important, we all want to see a DRT that's thriving. And I know, we've been hit by so many different, instances. For instance, the pandemic hit us pretty hard, and your predecessor really stepped up to the plate to ensure that our people were provided the relief, right, the economic relief. And I know there's been trying times with DRT. I think DRT, like any other agency, has issues in regards to staffing. And I think staffing is so critical to ensure that DRT is functioning to its fullest, as well as the automation. So I think it's unfortunate that, maybe not in hindsight, but the FMI system was not contemplated to incorporate DRT's needs. And I think that's another huge thing that we need to improve. I know there's a lot of improvement happening within the agency. There is more online users. For instance, BPT is fully online at this point, which is huge, considering the backlog of paperwork that had to be dealt with. Also, the almost instantaneous release of tax refunds, I think is huge, another huge accomplishment of DRT. And so, there have been strides that DRT has made, considering the last Inspector General report. But a lot of the issues still remain. And so these questions are really going to pertain to how do we move DRT forward into a thriving agency. And so I guess there are some questions that I have prepared here. And also my colleagues also have questions as well. But I do want to recognize Speaker Terlaje. I apologize, I didn't recognize her when she walked in earlier. Anybody else? Okay. So you were talking in your testimony how you moved from the private sector to DRT. And so can you discuss how your previous experiences, including your experiences as a deputy, prepared you for this role as a director?
Yes, so in my private sector experience, I came from an airline actually that was not the hometown carrier here. It actually had a smaller structure. And so with that smaller structure, I was actually able to, interact with the larger organization, the headquarters and so forth. In preparing for some of the activities that we had on an annual basis, whether it was revenue strategy meetings or whether it was our general global sales meetings, there were practices that kind of carried over. So, it's the networking, it's actually the problem solving, it's having to make do with perhaps a budget that is limited somewhat in scope, and so forth. And it's also having to take employees and perhaps try to cross-utilize them or train them, and so forth. I don't know if you're aware, but actually in the organizational chart for the agency, the deputy director actually doesn't oversee the tax groups. However, I am grateful to my predecessor for having taken me under her wing and exposing me to enough of those transactions and meetings such that I'm able to at least have, I'm able to participate in while she is absent or while she is away. So, you know, those kinds of experiences, and believe me, I continue to learn as I'm on the job. Those kinds of experiences, along with the staff that have the technical expertise, allow me to be able to continue the operations of the agency. I can't do it alone, you know, and really the people that are there are the ones, so they're the true hardworking heroes of the agency. They put up with quite a bit. They've endured so much for so long, and I just want to be able to be their advocate.
Okay, appreciate that response. The next question is tax compliance. So what strategies do you plan to implement to enhance tax compliance across all sectors?
Well, you know, now that we have, you know, we do have some movement that we do need to make. You know, through attrition, we've lost some very talented and knowledgeable people. And so prior to even the former director Shimizu's departure, we had set out on a plan to ensure that our staffing, you know, is supplemented, if you will, our staffing pattern. And again, going back to probably cross-utilization and so forth, and along with the administrator's help for the tax enforcement and taxpayer services areas, we want to kind of go back and revamp or perhaps revisit some of the policies that perhaps leave some gaps. So that is, the plan is to continue that. And of course, now that we have in-house legal counsel, we are certainly looking to, you know, take closer looks or a closer look at some of those longstanding policies, or perhaps probably even practices that people have come to believe is, you know, part of the quote law. So,
been many public auditor reports kind of highlighting some of those gaps. So that's something we'll definitely follow up with.
yeah,
As far as technology, how do you intend to use technology to improve the efficiency and transparency of tax collections and administration?
We hope to expand what we already have and what has been done previously. We hope to expand that such that, you know, perhaps there is more, if you will, you know, for example, interfacing between the branches. Because sometimes, you know, we know that there are people out there who go to a certain branch and then kind of get frustrated because yet another branch is telling them something different. We plan to use the technology to improve those, you know, those difficulties and try to make for a smoother transition within the agency.
And is the agency still undergoing manual entry?
There are some parts where there are manual entries, but however, the business privilege tax, for example, you know, that by law, they are supposed to file that online. There are certain things that, you know, are manual. The driver's license branch, for example, they are still in a position where customers fill out an application and our people are entering that manually. We're hoping, or we were hopeful, that we would have come to the point such that, you know, we could have people enter data on their own and then have it come over to us, you know, and, you know, just be able to kind of pre-register, if you will. But it's still a work in progress.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your responses, by the way. In regards to staff, I know this is something we've talked about in several meetings regarding how do we ensure there's a pipeline going into DRT and working with our educational institutions such as GCC, UOG, how do we get more a qualified pool to get into DRT? I know there's also the talk about increased pay or parity in pay because some of the staff are leaving to even DOA for higher pay but less work, I was told. So, I mean, those are obviously issues, but if you can maybe talk about what your plan is to, bring in that pipeline into DRT.
Well, we have already gone into discussions with the Department of Administration's director in the hope to try to kind of revamp some of the position description qualities or qualifications, I should say, and take another look at that. I mean, we are certainly not the only agency that's running into recruitment and retention issues. However, with that said, and to your point, we will explore the opportunity to work with our local institutions and see if we can create perhaps programs where someone can come right on in to the agency.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to working with you on that one.
Yes.
And with all the partners, stakeholders. Okay, public service improvement. What measures will you take to improve customer services? So I think while you're as as acting director, what changes have been made, and what do you want to continue to do, or what do you see as your next step in improving customer service?
Well, it's really more just as simple as trying to get people to communicate. Many times when you have irate customers, and it's certainly no different in the airline industry, what people kind of know that they probably can't change the situation. But what they are upset about is the fact that nobody seems to listen, or perhaps they're not being made or kept updated with the situation. So, first and foremost, it's always been about improved communication, and it's also with how we interact with our customers. We recognize that for too long, perhaps far too long, sometimes, people, we're only human. We get tired, perhaps, of the same questions over and over again, forgetting that each person is different. And while it's the same question, each person deserves to be treated with respect, at the very least. So first and foremost, again, going back to that, it's really the improved communication parts, whether it's between the divisions, whether it's between us and another agency, and just to the public itself. We want to continue to improve in the way of technology, and also just, again, revisiting, revamping, perhaps even deleting some processes or practices that no longer serve its purpose.
So yeah, I've actually utilized the services of DRT, and I've noticed the quick processing time, at least when I was there. So do you have any metrics in place to measure that and just having continual improvement in DRT?
Metrics themselves, we re-implemented the use of the kiosk at the driver's license branch, although we have run into some issues with that. That particular kiosk does give us the ability to kind of, take a look at how long it takes an examiner to process an application from start to finish. And so forth. So perhaps that is the only metric in place that we continue to try to work on. In some of the other areas, there are certain things like technical time reports and so forth. And we still have a lot of progress to do or improvements to make in those areas.
How do you intend to make those improvements? How do you intend to make those improvements?
Well, first, we probably would need to meet regularly. Sometimes in our jobs, we get so bogged down with the daily work and putting out these little fires here and there, that, you know, we simply just need to make sure that we meet on a regular basis, we meaning the staff, you know, probably even, and just kind of going over all of the SOPs that have been in place and so forth, just revisiting those again to see what works, what doesn't work, you know, where we can eliminate redundancies, and, you know, just could we do something perhaps in a different way that nobody has ever thought of. So it's really a matter of getting the team together, but not just getting them together, but getting them together regularly.
Thank you. Sorry, there's a long list of, if you just
Okay.
bear with me. Maybe I'll cut it down so my colleagues can have a chance. For auditing, how can you ensure that audit processes are fair and transparent? I mean, transparent to the point where, you know, you're not going to disclose the personal information, but I guess transparent to those that are, I guess, in the division.
So
If that makes sense.
I believe that we do a fair job at this time, admittedly, and this was even something that former Director Shimizu and I talked about, and that was just to kind of perhaps create a different position, something more like a quality assurance officer, if you will, you know, to oversee some of the branches. And that is, you know, for that person to have close communication with the respective supervisors or administrators, and therefore be able to kind of keep everyone, you know, keep things, you know, top of mind, just so that, you know, we don't get caught up in the day-to-day operations and forget, you know, important things. So that is one idea, certainly. And, you know, it's really, again, a matter of revisiting what we currently do.
Revenue generation. So what innovative methods do you propose to increase revenue without imposing new taxes?
I think, first and foremost, we probably should revisit, you know, we certainly don't, you know, make policy, but my personal opinion is, you know, there are some fees perhaps that we could go back and revisit. It's certainly been many years since some of those fees have been, you know, kind of changed, or, you know, it's remained in place. You know, for example, I'll tell you this, some of the business privilege tax people tell me, you know, it only costs, you know, for example, $1, you know, whatever it is, to go and make a copy. But because some of the items that are being asked for were manually filed, you know, this is way before the law had taken effect, you know, that person is having to go and sort through a whole bunch of boxes in order to find something. And, you know, of course, that takes away from their day-to-day operation or even having to serve the public. So, you know, there are probably different ways that we could generate money, but I think for me, it's really going back to making sure that we collect what is owed. You know, it's, you know, as opposed to trying to increase things. Let's just go back and make sure that we're accurately correcting what is owed to the government.
Okay, and then as far as crisis management, how would you handle a sudden financial downturn or budgetary crisis?
Well, I would probably I would have to call the team together. I would have to call, you know, the people that actually have the data and can confirm whether or not, you know, or to ascertain what the actual situation is. You know, it's not something I would do myself, but it is something that wherein I would head and kind of call the people that do have the information together so that we can come to a decision collectively.
It's to stakeholder engagement. How do you plan to improve relations with taxpayers and the business community?
I've always been a proponent of education and, you know, awareness campaigns. I believe in doing that, in actually carrying that out, whether it's, you know, through across different media. I believe that is probably key in improving relations. You know, and I apologize because, you know, the airline industry is what I you know, come from. I spent nearly 30 years there, but, you know, from, you know, we would talk within the team and we would say things like, you always had to take that extra step. You had to anticipate. You had to, you know, extend and ask and you know, ask questions such that if you could take care of something then and there, then you would do so. You wouldn't wait until that person came back upset because something didn't happen, you know. And so I believe that that is probably the key, if not, you know, probably the easiest thing to fix right now. And it is certainly something that even the former director and I, you know, were strong believers in.
Okay, my last question. What is your long-term vision for the Department of Revenue and Taxation?
You know, some may call this pie-in-the-sky thinking, but I've always envisioned that the Department of Revenue and Taxation would truly be like the IRS. You know, I want us to be at a place where when people come in, you know, you have that sense of respect. You know, you know you're there, you know that it's serious business, but certainly not unapproachable, you know, in trying to seek out solutions to any problems that taxpayers or customers may have. But that is my long-term goal. It's, you know, of course we want to improve things such that, you know, and I used to often say this, is you chip away at everything, right? And then all of a sudden you find that you're suddenly where you need to be. That's my dream for the agency.
So it's Zuz Masi, Acting Director Lizama, for your response and also stepping up to the plate to accept this nomination.
Thank you.
So I'm going to open up to my colleagues, probably in order of arrival. Senator Kanata, Senator Taidagui.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues. Good afternoon, Maria.
Hi.
You know, our oversight chair was chairman of this committee. She had a lot of great questions, so there's not a whole lot to ask. Mm-hmm. I too would like to thank you for wanting to take this position. It's a very, very, very stressful position. And I want to also thank your family, your husband especially, for allowing you to do this. Mm-hmm. Because it sure does, it's more than 8 to 5. You know, I know people call you, you know, late, and I've called you, I'm guilty as charged, you know, when there's a constituent who needs assistance, and you've always been there to answer that call. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that much about other directors who are willing to take that call, you know, at 8 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. They're tired, so I apologize again for doing that, but this constituent was, you know, really irate, and we need, and like you said, you know, you're very good at customer service in the industry that you come from. So there's no doubt about it, because a lot of times we get constituents who are very irate, like you said earlier, and you're right, they just need to be heard. And that brings me to the telephone system. Everyone talks about REVALUATION trying to get through on the telephone system. Mm-hmm. Is REVALUATION looking at doing something to, you know, to have somebody answer the call, or at least there's some areas in businesses today where you can go online and you can actually chat with an individual live chatting to get the information you need. So what are you doing with respect to that telephone line system issue?
We started a discussion with OTEC with regard to upgrading our phone systems, and I believe that was in 2022 perhaps, maybe even as early as late 21. And unfortunately, there was an issue or a protest, if I'm not mistaken, with the procurement process. What we've done in the meantime, though, is we've tried to spread the word about the fact that we do have a call center. And that call center, although it's only staffed with 4 people, you know, they handle quite a number of calls. It looks like we probably need to go back and kind of pass along their information, and as well as the email address, so that they can certainly route any issues they may have there. I do admit that the issues with the phones certainly affect our individual staff members' ability to effectively answer them at times. And so what, again, we've tried to do is just kind of redirect those calls to the call center. My personal dream actually is to expand that call center such that there would be a specialist for each, maybe not for each branch, but for some of the groups, so that when someone calls, and again, this is certainly not unlike what we call a system operations control center in an airline. So you have this huge room, and you have different areas, all dedicated to different types of aircraft. And so you have mechanics dedicated to a certain aircraft. You have all these different people with specialties dedicated to particular aircraft. And so they know all things about that. And my dream is to have something similar to that, in the sense that when you call, because there are times when the vast majority of calls are general in nature. It's things like, what time do you close? What kind of form do I need? You know, and so forth. And they're not actually looking for a specific person, per se, to answer their call. So that is part of my long-term goal, and I hope to be able to realize that while I'm, you know, hopefully if I'm still in this position.
Well, that's always been the one thing everybody talks about revenue tax is trying to get through, just to have somebody hear what they need, you know, and answer the questions. So I know there's a long-time goal. It sounds great, but I really need you to pull deep down all your marketing skills and everything that you have in there to do something now, today, because they really need that help today. You know, so I appreciate, and whatever we can do to help you. I mean, it's not always throwing money in your department, you know, and giving it to you. It's, you know, trying to think outside the box to make something work, you know, even with less money. I like that part a lot. The other question I have is, wait, are you still a member of the University of Guam School of Business and Public Administration?
That was when I was with the airline, so
okay, so you're no longer, okay.
No longer.
Okay. I don't know how you'll find time for some of these things.
I was just about to say, it's kind of difficult to, you know, for me, and in fact, some of my family and my friends can tell you that I sometimes miss out on things, you know, just because of the work, you know, that I'm handling.
Well, thank you for your dedication. I really appreciate it. And I hope those who are listening to realize that you do. You put other things aside so that you can get the job done and satisfy the needs of our people. Especially a lot of them are, you know, having a difficult time, and that comes when there's certain laws that you have, guidelines, rules, and regulations where you waive certain taxes. You know, you have that ability to do that at revenue tax. But how do you ensure, you know, even though it gives you the guidelines on what can be allowed to be waived, but how do you ensure fairness, that everybody that comes to revenue tax is treated fairly? Because you hear these stories like, you know, John, you know, Doe over there got a waiver of this amount, but yet, you know, Cindy Doe did not. How do you ensure that fairness at revenue tax when it comes to the waiving these fees?
So there are certain things, you know, I mean, let's use the driver's license branch, for example. You know, if a fee was to be waived, and it's probably a minimum of $5, right?
Oh, let me. I'm talking about taxes.
Taxation. Okay.
Let's go to taxation, because fees like that are understandable.
I may have missed that. Well, there are processes in place whereby any request to waive tax is, you know, first and foremost, we always advise people, and people, there's certainly no shortage of people who come up looking for me, wanting to meet with me, thinking that I would simply just say, okay to waive. There's a process that's in place. You know, I trust the collection supervisor. I trust the people in the tax, enforcement and taxpayer groups, they follow a process. They each have their own process. A lot of that, I mean, there are forms. You have to certainly justify the ask. And in the end, though, I simply ask the administrators or the supervisors this: how would you have handled this if it was somebody else? What is your normal practice? Like let's say, for example, it's somebody prominent. My instruction has been, and any of the staff can tell you that, I certainly go back and I say, how would you handle this? What is a normal procedure? And then we take it from there. So I truly believe that the staff already practice fairness.
Well, what about, do any of these, after they're agreed to sign off or waive these, do they ever go to the director's office to ensure, like, John Doe is, okay, this is what he was waived for, and then Cindy was waived for that? Did you ever have that opportunity to, do the cross-check to ensure that there is fairness at Rev and Tax? Is that something that you look at?
I believe, I myself don't look at that. I mean, I take that back. We do get something that, we were getting things such as what's called a director's report. And the director's report will indicate, if there was any abatement, and so forth. It doesn't encompass the entire, area with which things, get waived,
Get
if you
approved,
will,
yeah.
or abated. But there are some, there are some things in place that will actually do that. Now, could we always use more people, perhaps, to do more checks? Certainly, and that's something that we hope we get to.
Okay, well, you might want to look at that,
Okay.
just to, for a while, at least understand who are getting these being waived of paying taxes while other people are paying taxes. Something you might want to look at just to ensure it's being done fair. And like you said, cross-check and check and balances are so important. That being said, I know that you have a technical research and appeals administrator.
Yes.
Okay. Who oversees the acting deputy of tax commission?
So the person who is the Technical Research and Appeals Bureau Administrator, she's currently doubling as the acting Deputy Tax Commissioner.
Okay, because who oversees her work? Who oversees the Technical Research and Appeals Administrator?
So because she's doubling as that, then it would actually be me.
Okay, so you do check her work, because these two positions, they're the checks and balances. So if the Technical Research and Appeals Administrator, who listens to appeals and make decisions, then there's someone that's called the Acting Deputy of Tax Commissioner who has to oversee that person's job. But if you have that same person in that position, that person can act like anything, do whatever they want without being checked upon.
That is correct, and we take steps to ensure that in the case of any conflict of interest, that I would actually step in. And just to let you know, we are going to address the issue of the lack of a actual deputy tax commissioner.
In the meantime, Marie, if I ask, because we're talking about checks and balances here within your agency.
Sure.
To please put that on the radar.
Yes.
There needs to be checks and balance in that area. Yes. My last question. Of course, it's going to make it easy. I think it's important that whoever we confirm, to sit in this position, the people of Guam want to make sure that we're putting qualified individuals.
Sure.
And you, to me, have exemplified that kind of person to sit in this position, even to take this kind of job, because it's very difficult, and I appreciate everything that you do. And there is a lot to do. You have one of the largest agencies,
yes.
To oversee.
Yes.
And you are our pocketbook, you know, to Guam. So
I know,
we're here to help you as well.
Thank you.
But we're also here to ensure that, you know, that checks and balances, again, puts in play. My last thing is the cybersecurity. I mean, this is the latest in attacks, in ransomware, and all that is going on that could really take our island down. We saw it during Typhoon Marwa when everything went down. And there was once upon a time it happened years ago where there was information and data, tax information that was taken from Rev Tax. I don't know if you remember way back it happened, and a lot of us were affected. Our information and data was given, social security number, and it was taken, and a lot of us had identity thefts that we had to deal with. So what is Rev Tax doing to ensure, you know, there's none of this, you know, hacking into the system, stealing data and information? And are you set up with a private company to oversee your technology to ensure its safety on software, or are you with OTEC?
So OTEC oversees our, oversees that aspect of the agency. And we are certainly well aware of the issues of cybersecurity. In fact, we also just recently had the IRS in town with regard to its triennial safeguard review. And, you know, what do we do with federal tax information? And so in working with those different groups, you know, we have procedures in place, you know, and so forth. And also just something as simple as reminding employees, you know, when you get up to use the restroom, you know, don't leave your computer, you know, pretty much you need to log off. You know, simple practices perhaps that we need to be reminded of. And so in doing our part, you know, it kind of helps with the larger picture. But
do you have a dedicated office in Rev Tax solely to?
There is a systems, there are 2 systems personnel that actually work, that work with OTEC. So we do have 2 people there that are there that
what is ideal? But what is ideal in that area? How many individuals do you need in that area?
Gosh, of course, we could always use more individuals, right? Because if you're talking about an agency of 165 employees, right, you know, all
and the
with
data that you have in your hands right now is very critical data. I mean, a lot of us I was one of them. I was a victim to identity theft. And it was based on what had happened when Rev Tax, you know, that information was hacked and got out and sold to the highest bidder. So I was one of those individuals. So, and that was back in 2000, I think it was 2014 when this happened, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you can imagine what damage they can do now today. So let us know, your budget's coming up.
Yes.
You know, budget hearings coming up.
I certainly will.
Yeah, and that's an area that you really need to vamp up, is your cybersecurity. People don't realize, I mean, once that's down, it just freezes everything. Everybody's at a standstill. So, again, Maria, I know you're doing a great job. Thank you for answering the calls and wanting again to step up. Keep up the good job. You know, keep up the good work. And my door is always open. Please know that.
Thank you.
You can always come to me if there's anything that you need help with. Okay.
I will.
And good luck to you. And thank you again to your family for letting you do this. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kanata, do you have any questions for the nominee?
No, I certainly just wanted to wish Ms. Lizama the best on her new post. I know you were working there as a deputy, so I know if the former director is supporting you, then you should be doing a good job. And if your husband and your son are supporting you, then you should be good with this job. And I wish you all the best again. If there's anything my office can do to support you, please let us know.
Thank you, Senator.
Again, God bless.
All right, thank you, Senator. Senator Fisher, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I know that one part of the discussion we've just engaged in is this idea of fairness, equality. What we're really talking about, ma'am, I think is this mechanism, offers and compromise. And as I understand it, your because we are linked to the federal code, that your analysis of offers in compromise is tightly controlled by the, I think it's Revenue Agent Field Manual, rules and regs, and so forth and
Correct.
so on. So there is an actual, I guess, decisional tree or that you have to go through when you receive an offer in compromise.
Correct.
So an offer in compromise is, I just don't think I can pay it. You know, you want 150,000, I can come up with 50. And then we would go through the process, correct?
Yes.
But, you know, the idea of fairness does, in my mind, I'd like to hear your comment, does not necessarily mean equal. Because if a rich man comes up to you and says, I've got an offer in compromise, I owe 150, I'll give you 25. But yet that guy can still pay it. You're probably going to reject that OIC.
Yeah, I mean, you know, our people will likely have to take into consideration what exactly is being asked.
Ability
And
to pay, that sort of thing?
the ability to pay, you know, and so forth. I mean, you know, it's, there's like a checklist, if you will, that they go through in order to determine whether or not they can do that. And you know, the agents actually don't just make these decisions on their own. You know, of course, they're consulting with their supervisor, who in turn consults with the tax enforcement administrator, you know, and then of course the director. So it goes through a process.
So I guess the point I'd like to make on this point is that just because we have even tax bills, you and, or me and taxpayer over there, does not necessarily mean that we're going to have the same outcome, nor does it mean that the process was unfair.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
Yeah, the fact that, you know, we have similar tax bills and we have similar outcomes does not mean that, or different outcomes rather, that doesn't mean that the process was unfair. Is that correct?
Right, it doesn't mean it wasn't fair. There are different factors in every person's situation. And, you know, no two situations are alike or cases are alike.
Okay.
So,
And my understanding also, you know, on behalf of your agency is your hands are tied to an extent on reaching compromises.
correct, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then on that issue, earlier we talked about perhaps tax-related crimes, civil or criminal, I suppose. Do you have attorneys on staff that have LLMs in tax?
So we have 3 attorneys, none of which have a tax LLM. However, I can tell you that their workload is probably 90% non-tax. And we certainly go through a whole lot of different things with regard to, you know, I mean, it ranges, you know, from something as small as, you know, determining whether or not a policy, you know, is accurate, or how do we proceed in certain things to, you know, actual litigation.
Okay. You said that 90% of the work is non-tax?
I would venture to say that it's more administrative in nature.
Okay, administrative within the agency, though?
Within the agency and with our dealings with the public and with other agencies as well.
How much are they getting paid?
I don't have that exact number with me, but I'm sure that it's probably comparable or on par with an attorney in any other government of Guam agency.
Okay. Are you aware of whether or not any criminal actions have been undertaken on behalf of the agency in the last 2-3 years?
Criminal actions, meaning...
Did somebody have to go to the district court for enforcement or anything like that?
There is a case going on right now. That's the extent of it. We are awaiting, you know, awaiting a decision from the judge.
I think that the attorneys working for DRT, as well as your collection agencies, or your collection agents, I think they have a duty to be aggressive, but appropriately aggressive. And my experience, personal as well as on behalf of clients, has been that the agency, in fact, is aggressive, but appropriately aggressive. You know, this is our money, right? So, yeah. So I think, I've been impressed with the fact that
We're certainly very happy to have them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, just your rank and file collections branch.
Yeah.
They lean forward, which I'm grateful for. Even, you know, if I have to write a check, it's, you know. And then, I wanted to ask you, do you have an opinion? You know, we've got the business privilege tax here on Guam. There's, you know, perennial discussions. Let's get rid of the GRT, the gross receipts tax, and sub it in with a sales tax. Do you have a professional opinion on that? And a follow-up question is, if you have had those discussions, have you been able to determine whether or not a sales tax would be a greater driver of revenue than a GRT?
I think, you know, we've had very little discussion on that. You know, certainly, again, it's not our agency's position, you know, to create policy or, you know, and so forth. But, you know, my personal opinion, sometimes it might even be easier to have a sales tax, you know, given that in other areas, you know, for example, you know, one day out of the week, it'll be a no sales tax, you know, kind of day, you know, thing. But again, that's not my position as the agency's current head.
Yeah.
You know,
does your agency have the ability to do the analytics behind determining whether or not a sales tax is going to be better for the island than the GRT? Or
we probably could if we you know, researched hard enough. But right now we're really just trying to kind of clean up, you know, certain things and figure out whether or not there really is, you know, an issue and so forth. My concern really is just collecting what is owed to the agency.
Okay. This is probably the wrong word, but you are tasked with collecting the revenue. And naturally, people don't want to pay the revenue.
Yeah.
They don't want to pay taxes, so they're all, you know, we're naturally looking for a way out, right? And some is appropriate. Yeah, it's fine. You know, the old saw is, you know, tax avoidance is fine. In fact, you guys encourage us to avoid paying taxes, but we're not allowed to evade taxes. So my question would be, do you have any estimate of how much revenue is out there that we're just not capturing for one reason or another?
I don't have that information in front of me.
Would anybody in your, you know, okay, fair enough, but do you think, does anybody in your agency have a guesstimation on that?
I'm sure that the respective branch leaders probably may be able to take a look at that. And that's something, again, we need to work on together.
It's a formidable task, trying to figure out
it is.
And then how to get it. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then this one is this is probably going to be out of left field. You are aware that the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution does not apply to Guam. I was reading an article in a tax review. You might not be comfortable answering this. If you're not, I perfectly understand. The Ninth Circuit has held the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution does not apply to Guam, which means that we can, in theory, regulate interstate commerce. Well, I was reading a tax article that said, if Congress has waived Commerce Clause prohibitions as to the territories, the unincorporated territories, I think that's the Virgin Islands, United States, I don't know who else is unincorporated, Samoa? Somewhere. But they also said that because the Commerce Clause, because the Commerce Clause doesn't apply, the import-export clause doesn't apply, which means, you know, bottom line, what that means is maybe on Guam, we can raise the use tax without violating the Constitution. So I've had conversations with a couple of senators in the 37th and some attorneys about the possibility. Again, this is out of left field. You weren't prepared for this question, I know it.
No.
But do you have any chance, an opinion on that, on whether or not, boiled down, that Guam could raise the use tax?
No, no, I don't. I apologize, I don't have that
Okay.
information. Honestly, we're really just trying to even collect
Yeah.
the current, use tax.
Okay, because if this conversation that we're having, bears fruit, your agency and your opinion will be key, I think, to whether or not we can move
And
forward.
we'd appreciate being brought into that discussion.
Who would you recommend that we talk to, with your permission, of course, on your staff about this issue?
That area would likely be the Taxpayer Services Administrator, who's Jerome Muggan. Jerome Muggan.
Joe?
Jerome?
Okay.
Yeah,
Jerome
Jerome
Muggan.
Muggan,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the answer. Sorry for the, left field question there.
It's okay.
Okay.
Something to think about now.
Yes, ma'am, because money.
Yes.
We might, it might be multi-millions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I
Thank you.
appreciate your answers. I appreciate your candor, and I appreciate your willingness to serve. Thank you, and thank you.
All right, Mrs. Uzmasi. Speaker Terlaje, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Marie and Ms. Lizama, Director Lizama, for your testimony, and for all of those who submitted testimony in writing in support of her nomination. All of the written is in support. In fact, the former director, Daphne Mansipit-Shimizu, concludes by saying, ultimately, however, it takes someone who is courageous, who doesn't shy away from the difficult issues or conversations, and who has the drive and motivation to get things done. From the day that Marie began with DRT, she had huge tasks to undertake, and she demonstrated that she's not only courageous, driven, and motivated, she is compassionate and kind and takes the time to do her homework and to understand the issues. And that has been my experience with you as well. So I want to thank you for that. I like my colleague, find you as a director to be very responsive, which builds trust for us senators trying to get information and just to get straight answers. And I very much appreciate that. I think I tried to work with your office, even for one of the bills I was trying to make it more convenient for high school students to get their IDs. And your staff went above and beyond. I think because of your leadership, they came in with their own ideas and perfect solutions, I think. And they knew all the parameters that we had to work within, so it made it so efficient and much easier to get things done, I thought. So I just want to thank you for that and ask you to continue that. I have a couple questions. And the online, I think, continues to improve, so we continue to see improvement, so I appreciate that. That has been a game changer. Daphne, thank you for being here. I think that's been a game changer for the people of Guam and for us. So thank you. I just wanted to find out about the tobacco tax. So we had a law passed to do tobacco stamp. We also been trying to follow up with this for quite a while. There's been several initiatives over the years. However, this all began with an audit saying that we weren't collecting enough on the tobacco because of the way this transactions, we can't account for it. And so I just wanted to ask you do you have any conflict or impediment to implementing that tobacco tax stamp law? And what improvements have you found at DRT or made at DRT as a result of the audit findings in collecting tobacco taxes?
When we had the audit, we actually talked it over with the staff that conducted it. I'd like to think that we clarified some misconceptions with regard to the process. We actually went through and explained the bonded warehouse process, and so forth. And by the way, the tobacco stamps, we would have no issue with implementing that. It is the law. And, so the stamps themselves, I can't speak beyond the fact that, we did go through the procurement process. And, once we are ready with that, we will certainly apprise the body, of the outcome. So we continue to work with, the wholesalers with regard to the process of, coming in. Again, it's the bonded process. We continue to have someone dedicated to that. It certainly takes a lot of time and, to ensure that everything that's being shipped in is accounted for. Anytime something is withdrawn, it's accounted for, and so forth. I think if anything, it's a little disheartening to the staff to feel accused by some members of the public. I'm not certainly not saying that it's you, but some members of the public that, there is a lot that is not, being captured. They certainly are comfortable with what is going on right now. I'm pretty sure once tax stamps are implemented that, perhaps, there would be a tightening of some of those things. But, for the most part, I think we're doing an okay job, with collection.
All right. Yeah, I think, well, it stemmed from the auditor's report. Yeah. So if you're saying you're comfortable and you're doing an okay job, I'm curious if he would agree. It's really him, and it's actually some tobacco companies accusing that there is another market going on that we're not capturing. Yeah,
I mean, it's been an ongoing thing. There are things that we differed on with the public auditor's report, perhaps even the timing. So what we've actually recently gone back and done is, we're trying to do reconciliation. We want to make sure that, again, whatever is being reported, is collected, and that's not just on tobacco stamps, it's on other things. And so we've actually had more discussions with, customs, perhaps how can we more expeditiously reconcile some data, and so forth. So it is a constant work in progress.
All right, that should help reconciling with customs more quickly, efficiently. What about, so would you say that this remains one of the higher priorities? Do you think we're going to see that stamps?
Yes,
effective?
It is.
All right.
It is certainly an item that's on our weekly standing report. So.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair, for your excellent questions. Those were very thorough. So,
Thank you. And ma'am, thank you for recognizing our hardworking employees. They don't often get you to hear that. Thank you, all of you, for doing that. I know that some of them are watching, and they're appreciative of that acknowledgement.
Right, thank you, Speaker. So again, I just want to thank you, Acting Director, for stepping up to the plate and accepting this nomination. I'm a true believer in lifelong learning, and being the fact that you were the understudy for the former director, I think you're in a good position to pick up a lot of that information that is needed to serve as a director. I think also what's important to note is with any leader, right, of an agency, it's important to note what one's limitations are and to look for expertise to help bridge that gap.
Yes.
And I think we all want the same thing as far as what DRT is concerned, is to function at its highest level. And my office has always been reaching out to DRT to assist in any way, and I look forward to working with you to continually to improve DRT. And I really like your vision. You want it to be like at the IRS, and I think that's a very lofty and ideal goal for DRT. So, being that are there any further questions? There is one more question.
Okay.
Chair Sabina's asking one. It's an opinion. Do you have an opinion on delinkage from the Internal Revenue Service Code?
On what?
Delinkage.
Oh gosh, I mean, I'm a proponent of keeping it the way it is. I think some other areas have shown that delinking is probably not a good idea. Yeah. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. So being that there are no further testimonies or comments on the nomination of Marie P. Lizama to serve as Director of Department of Revenue and Taxation, this confirmation has been duly heard. The committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. May 14th, 2024. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning, which can be dropped off at the mailboxes here at the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. We would call for a moment's recess at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Buenas. The committee is back from recess. We are on to our next agenda item, which is to receive testimony on the executive reappointment of Cynthia V. Ecube Esquire to serve as a member of the Board of Equalization for a term of 4 years from the date of confirmation. Some of the important roles of the Board of Equalization is to certify the roles, which prior to October 31st every year, which really sets the real property taxes for the upcoming year. Another important role that the board serves is to resolve any kind of questions or complaints regarding increase in property taxes should it get to the board level. Oftentimes they get resolved at the agency level. And at this point, we are going to invite testimony. We currently just have the nominee herself, I believe, but there are people who also signed up, checkmarked in favor for her confirmation. So at this time, I would like to invite the nominee herself, Cynthia, for her testimony. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Honorable Sabina Flores Perez, and I was hoping there would be more people, and I was going to grab onto that crowd, but they figured that enough was enough with too many lawyers in the House. Dear Chairperson Perez, members of the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning, Hafa. My name is Cynthia Ecube. Many of you know me as Cubie, and I'm pleased to appear before this legislative body to provide testimony in support of my nomination, or I should say renomination, to serve as member for the Board of Equalization. As many of you probably know, I am an attorney and private practitioner licensed to practice law in all local courts of Guam, the Federal District Court of Guam, and the Ninth Circuit of Appeals. I've practiced law for approximately 33 years as a private practitioner on this island. I was initially appointed to serve as a member of the Board of Equalization in 2004, and have continued to serve on the board up to the present date. Having served on the Board of Equalization, I have recognized the importance and duties of this board. As members of the board, we are tasked with the responsibility to ensure the certification of the real property tax roll every October 31st of each year, and to address appeals, as the chairperson has mentioned, filed by property owners seeking a reduction or abatement of their real property taxes, taking into consideration the supporting information, appraisal reports, tax assessments, comparables, and documents relative to each applicant's request to reduce their property assessment. I present today that currently one of the most important issues in this area is the quennial evaluation and appraisal of Guam's real property in accordance with 11 GCA Section 24306. It is my understanding under this law that as of February of this year, the Department of Revenue and Taxation issued a request for proposal for services to conduct this evaluation and assessment. This evaluation serves as a vital component in determining Guam's real property tax assessment for owners of real property, and is a valuable resource for services to our island community. Throughout many years of service with the board, I've acquired both valuable and institutional knowledge necessary to fill the mandate of the Board of Equalization and its enabling legislation. I look forward to my continued service to the board and to the people of Guam, subject, of course, to favorable confirmation by the Guam legislature. Again, I want to thank all of you, Senators Kinata, our chairperson, Senator Brown, and Senator Taidagui, for the opportunity for me, allowing me to present testimony before this legislative body. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney Ecube, for being in that position for almost 20 years. So I know that's a lot to a lot of government service, and you know, we do appreciate you accepting the nomination, the renomination.
Thank you.
In regards to you mentioned institutional knowledge. Can you talk more about that, and how do you plan to use that in the coming years in the 4-year term, considering there's going to be reevaluation of property coming up?
Thank you, Chairperson Perez, and Senators. I feel that I've served as long on this board as I have been practicing law. So my institutional knowledge first came on when I was first confirmed by the legislature in 2004. And as for many of you recall, we had gone through bad or inclement weather issues. I recall when I first came on board, one of the issues that our board was facing at the time was the destruction of the Department of Revenue Taxation main offices. With that, we lost a lot of files and records of applicants who filed appeals related to the taxes. And there were also pending issues related to, decisions that had to be made. Prior to that, I understand that before I came on, there was not even a board constituted to address these real property tax issues. And what I've learned through all this process is just the continued automation, working together with the organization, working with the different directors who have been very supportive of our particular board. I think one of the most important things that I had to address coming on at the time, we had the late Chairperson Camacho, I believe, who was there, Gallo Camacho. We had suffered a lot of difficulty in terms of how we were going to find information and documentation about the applications that were filed, and dealing with a number of people who filed and were still pending decisions and had not had any decisions for over a period, I'm going to say 8 years. So what I saw was, one was to comprise of a board that was willing and daring enough to try to get through as many of these appeals that were filed and had not been acted upon. And so when I came on board, I recall my first thing was we had to meet and try to gather as much documentation from the employees of DRT, which was very difficult. The other thing too is we had to set meetings, of which I recall we had board meetings and hearings conducted on evening hours. So I remember staying back till about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, listening to these appeals that we needed to bring forward to complete it. So the institutional knowledge that I learned from that, Senators, was one, we need to gather as much information as we could that we had. Two, we had to work with the DRT body to get as much information as we could. And three, communicate with the applicants to bring them in. And unfortunately, what had happened during that process is that many of them couldn't move forward with their taxes because we need to address the initial appeal. So I think that it would really, what I learned from that process is we had a body that we worked together. We made it a very important goal to make sure that not only did we get the information that we could find, we had to contact the applicants to bring in copies of their appeals. And we had to set meetings that meant weeks long till we addressed it. And we had to make decisions, and we had to move forward. And I'm pleased to say, from then till now, we've addressed a significant number of most of the appeals. I think we only have a few left that we're still working on. So the knowledge there was, one, we need to get this thing going. Two, we needed to set the hearings. Three, we need to invite the applicants to make their presentation and to bring in whatever documentation, and in most cases, a lot of them who were commercials, property owners, would bring in their appraisers, such as at the time, Nick Captain, Micronesian Appraisal, or if it was residential, for example, it would be Chief Appraisal. So we were fortunate enough to get many of those things done. I recall too that when this triennial or the quinennial evaluation came up in 2012, when I was still on the board, or 13, I recall this was where Cornerstone was awarded the RFP for services. again, we had real difficulty because a lot of the information that they presented and the DRT used to put on the tax roll, we had about 1,000 or so more applicants that appealed. And that was, again, another difficult situation because we were now moving from just the manual appeals now to a organization that had did all the research and presented its findings to DRT and then issued, based on that, the tax roll was issued. So what I learned from that process was, as we were automating the system, it was very important to have the appraiser at the time was Cornerstone to come in and defend their findings. And this was one thing that I remember coming before this body and indicating that before any kind of RFP goes out, one of the biggest things that needs to be included in that request for proposal is to have the vendor come and testify and defend its findings before an evidentiary hearing if one was needed or conducted if an applicant filed an appeal. And I would note that as of last February of this year, I did review the RFP, and that was one of the services or the conditions would be that the appraiser or evaluator would have to attend these meetings or these hearings when an appeal is filed to defend its position on behalf of the Department of Revenue and Taxation. So again, as time has gone by, this is what I've seen, and I'm happy to report that at this juncture, we're able now to streamline more things and get through the appeals because the appeals, as I understood before I came on, had not been addressed for almost 6 to 8 years. So I hope that answers the question there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that explanation, very thorough explanation. In regards to the appeals, what's the percentage of, let's say, I think most likely the value of the land increases, and my assumption is that the challenge is basically why is it going up, right? And I guess what was the predominant resolution for these cases?
Well, in 2012, when I believe it was Cornerstone who was awarded the project and conducted, one of the biggest issues that we found when the Department of Revenue Taxation Real Property Division contacted me, or our group, was that there were some questions about the values. And what I've learned from this was much of the information that was extrapolated from information through the Department of Revenue and Taxation and with the resource tools that were used by the appraiser were really caused some technical issues. And when we were going through this to try to resolve this issue, I had suggested to the management group or to our staff, perhaps you should go and you should talk to the individuals that are filing appeals, or have the Department of Revenue and Taxation talk to Cornerstone, go through each of the applications to determine were there any errors, were there any issues. And I'm happy to report that at the time, they were able to go through with speaking with Cornerstone and with the applicants to find that much of the issues were technical issues. And I think as a result of that, they were able to resolve a number of those technical issues. And it could be the way they were plotting it out. I understood that when they were doing this, they were doing geographical plots on the top, and sometimes they missed certain things or they didn't include certain things. And when the staff of the Department of Revenue Taxation met with the Cornerstone evaluators, they were able to rectify a lot of those issues. So it significantly reduced, a number of the appeals because of the technical errors there. And I think it was because this was the first time that they had taken this approach.
Okay, thank you. So in regards to how do you plan to maintain the public trust in property assessment and appeals process? And I think you've been kind of describing the process, so maybe if you can provide a little bit more information on how do you want to ensure the public trust?
Well, I think it's been pointed out even during acting director's Lizama's testimony is it's fairness, due process and fairness. And many of us as attorneys, that's really the bulk of our practice. I'll give you an example that I think I've already brought out before. We've had commercial property owners bring in their appraisers who would provide these appraisal reports. I know that they've spent quite a bit of money to defend and argue their position if they're seeking a reduction or abatement in their taxes. Oftentimes it would really relate to really the improvements that were made to the property or non-improvements made to the property. In one or two scenarios I've encountered when I was serving on the board, we had a gentleman, and he was Manumco, and I should say I'm Manumco too, so we've got to put ourselves in that same category. But he came in, he did not have an appraiser. But what he did do that impressed me and our board when we were making a determination whether we need to reduce or abate his taxes was he was very well prepared. He obtained information of adjoining lands in which he was able to get the property assessments of each of them. And he took that information and then he provided a copy of his map and he showed us the location of where his property was and why he was requesting an adjustment. As I recall from that presentation, he talked about the lack of use of certain areas in the property. So without even providing an appraisal report or even a comparable from either an appraiser or a realtor, he actually did his own research. And he provided that information, gave us the adjoining landowners and what they were being assessed, and then showed us a description of his property and compared it to another piece of property with similar likeness. And as a result, as a board, you know, we couldn't impose a greater tax on him if another similar property taxes were far less than his. So that was one scenario that I recall that he was very well prepared. He came in, he showed us all the information. It was verified by the Department of Revenue and Taxation people that those were correct assessments of other properties. And we were able to approve an adjustment of his taxes. Another example I can tell you was, and it again goes to my institutional knowledge, we had an individual homeowner of a condominium who provided, and I don't remember all the details, but provided information and the lack of improvement in their property and was able to provide information stating this is the reason why we want the adjustment. And we confirmed with that particular owner who had several units in there and said this applies to all the other units in the condo. Well, at the time, the chairperson said, well, if that's applicable to your units and it's applicable to others, then as a body, we need to be fair. We can't just give you the adjustment. We need to talk to everybody else and give the adjustment to everybody within that condominium unit, because how can one have a lower tax assessment with some of the properties or condominiums and the others not? So that was a decision that our board did after confirmation and verification that it applied to all the other unit holders. And now again, this was several years back. So that's the two instances that I learned in that process was we didn't have applicants in the other part who filed applications, but if we want to equalize and be fair, we need to be fair to all the parties in that particular situation. I'm pretty sure that the homeowners were probably very happy at that point, but we knew somebody who had this, who had several units, it applied to that particular property, and we equalized everybody so that it would be fair to everybody within that particular condominium unit, Senator.
Okay, thank you for that response. What do you see as the biggest challenges for or opportunities for the Board of Equalization?
I think the number one thing is we need more board members. Currently, it's just me in an acting position This body also confirmed Attorney Janelyn Damian. I understand that our longtime member, Mr. Pel Sardomo, has now tendered his resignation. We lost one of our very valuable members, who was the late Mo Cotton, who was very helpful and had background in real estate. He was a realtor. So I think I urge the senators and this administration to consider putting people in those positions that are willing to serve. We all work together to help each other out. I'm very happy to report that, having communicated with the acting director, Marie Lizama, and then our former director, Daphne Shimizu, and our acting tax commissioner, Michelle Santos, they've all been wonderful in terms of helping our board. They've always reached out to myself and our board to try to provide us the tools and the staff to help us, but that's number one. Number two is I have a firm commitment that we need to follow the law and do the 5-year appraisal, because that's very important. And what I've seen in my 20 years is the real estate market, real property, fluid in its value. And one of the biggest issues that we had previously, and I'll tell you this because I practice in the courts and do a lot of probate law, is the judges will oftentimes ask, is this the correct value of the property? And I have to say, well, this is the tax assessment that was given. And oftentimes the courts will ask, well, how long ago was this assessment done? 10 years ago. So this is another reason why even the courts often rely on that information. So it's very important to keep to continue to do the 5-year evaluation, because it does help to serve. First of all, one big important thing besides the law is it's a funding source for the government. We have to certify the roll on the 31st day of every October. Once that roll is certified, they're already preparing the payments or the installment payments out to the homeowners. Without that, they can't move forward. And number two, it also provides a service to our community for all the income that we get. So we want to get the correct or close to the correct figures within that 5 years. So that's what I would say is the most important. 2 things: getting board members to serve, and 2, continuing with the evaluation and the assessment of our real property.
Okay, thank you. And then what long-term goals would you set for the board, and how would you work to achieve them?
Well, number one, I would hope that people would want to serve on the board. That's number one. Number two, getting good, competent people who can be fair and can evaluate the situation when an applicant comes before us. 3, I'm very happy to know that now the Department of Revenue and Taxation has in-house counsel. One of the big issues that I really had when I was serving as chair in the beginning is what we had legal issues that came up before the board. And those legal issues had to be presented to administration to get an opinion on whether or not the board had authority and or jurisdiction to address certain issues that would come up as part of the application process. And I don't think we ever got that question answered. And fortunately, that particular issue resolved itself somehow or another, and it had nothing to do with real property taxes, but it was part of an application appeal, information on appeal. So now that they have attorneys there, they can address the issues as to what our role is as board members. And would any of our decisions that would address an issue outside of our enabling legislation, would that be declared null and void? So I'm hoping now that with counsel there, we may come up on some legal issues that we can address with in-house counsel to answer those questions. Myself and Attorney Damian, we're lawyers, and I can tell you what I think it is, but what I think in the capacity of lawyer is completely different in the hat that I serve as a board member. And I don't think we wanted to run into any conflicts regarding that. So that's what I hope that we can get, long-term, is to see more continuity, getting legal counsel to help us on clarifying certain issues, And as time moves on with these evaluations, it will just get smoother and smoother because they have all the tools already.
All right, thank you so much for answering my questions. I'm going to open it up to the panel. First of all, I'd like to recognize Senator Joanne Brown as well. Senator Kanata, you're recognized. Senator Taidegui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kibi, thank you so much for stepping up to the plate. And of course, when you started talking about institutional knowledge, there was no doubt in my mind that you definitely carry that with you, as well as you're a very intelligent woman. I've known you for many years, and greatly appreciate you bringing your talent to serving in this board. But as I always talk to individuals who've been on a board for a long time, I always ask for them to take that institutional knowledge and try to train the next person. Because, you're there for a long time, sometimes, fresh eyes, different perspective, and the next generation coming up with different ideas, especially when it comes into technology. I'm still that old school kind of person. I like my paper, I enjoy holding the paper and reading it and marking it on that one. But so I hope that, as you go into this term, that maybe you can basically, what's the word I want to say, mentor somebody else to come up and step up, because, we're all getting in that retirement age, and I'd hate for that. I know, well, I am. You're still much younger than I am, but we all hope, that the next generation will come and step up to the plate and provide their time and their dedication to the people of Guam like you have for all these years. And we hope that happens. Because, and even something you mentioned earlier too, that find board members who actually do the work. I've talked to a couple board members in other, agencies, and, even there was one recently telling me that he reads all the documents, everything that's in there. And then when he gets there, two of the board members just show up. They didn't even read the documents. They just expect everyone else to do it and say, okay, how am I going to vote? So you're right. We need people who sit on boards, even working in the industry, of course, and in the agency, but people who sit on the board who's willing to read for 2 hours, to prepare themselves for board meetings. I have no doubt in my mind that you do your homework, and I greatly appreciate it. So that's why it's important for us when we drill people. I want to look at someone who's going to actually do the work and not just show up and, and have some donuts and coffee and just wait for somebody else to vote and go in that direction. Let somebody else do all the work. So I greatly appreciate all your dedication to this agency for so many years. And of course, you have my support. I very rarely say that on the floor. Don't worry, Maria. Marie, you have mine too as well. But thank you so much for stepping up to the plate. And again, my door is always open. If there's anything else I can do to help serve you, serve our people of Guam. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taidegui.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Brown, first of all, I want to recognize Speaker Terlaje. Senator Brown, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and certainly good afternoon to you, Attorney Ecube. If you were here since 2004, I would have voted for you the first time around, 20 plus years ago. Talk about time passing by. I certainly appreciate your dedication, because this is not easy work to do, and it does require a lot of time and attention. It's not one of the glamour boards and commissions that we have in the government of Guam. I certainly appreciate the comments by Senator Tello, because she does drill. She literally does drill those that come before us if she certainly feels that the position that they're holding is critically important and wanting to ensure that they can perform their duties. And I give her credit, because she certainly does do her homework. I have to give her credit, she does. And if I have a question, I normally will ask her if I need assistance with it, because I know she does her homework. Moving forward, though, because you have been working with this commission as long as you have, what would you like to see improved or enhanced?
As I've pointed out, Senator Brown, one of the things we now have I wouldn't say new member, but we have an attorney who's on board, Janelyn Damian. And I would like to see more professionals that can come on. I do this because, one, it does tangentially affect my practice. So it's really important that if I'm in tune to what's going on with the Board of Equalization, it really has a direct impact on how I practice law, especially in the area of real estate and development. So that's one. I'd like to see more professionals. Ms. Damian and I have worked together. She's an excellent lawyer. She knows a lot about government governance, and I'd like to see people such as realtors, appraisers, people that come on, but also people, Senator, that can be, as you've all pointed out, fair, and, you know, with due process, and really think about, one of the big issues I learned early on in my dealings with the board is, and this is credit to our former late chairperson, is just because, or vice chair, that was Mr. Cotton, just because a person walks in with an appraisal that they paid probably, anywhere between $750 to $7,000, doesn't mean that a person cannot come in here, do their research, get the copies of tax assessments, take a map, research, and then present it. So my big thing is, what is it that they have to offer that's verified? It doesn't have to be an expensive appraisal report. It just has to be that they've done their research and they've done it well. And I think for myself, what I'd like to see is, as Senator Taidagui pointed out, is I'd like to mentor people. First, I'd like to get people. And two, I'd like to get people that love this community. And I'd like to see that they're willing to do it because this is their payback to the community. That's the reason why I have stayed on. But also, it somehow directly affects my practice. And if I know all these different things, it just develops, it's just a better tool for me to improve my law practice because I do a lot of real estate law. So what I'd like to do is get more people on, more professionals, talk about this, and really think hard that a lot of these, what our role is not only just to help the community, but help them to remember that funding source from this assessment benefits our community. It helps with building better infrastructure. It helps with schools. It helps with the police department, because I know friends that live in the States that's what where they live, depending on where they live, is where their property taxes are either high or low. So this is why I would like to see more people care about the community. I don't know, because I'm a solo practitioner, and I can't even get people to come work in my office, so it's a difficult time. But as you pointed out, I'm very happy to see that we've got some young attorneys that want to serve on the board. I would like to see more people who can come on board, and we can mentor them, and we can share our experiences with what we've dealt with. And most of the experiences I've encountered have been when we set our hearings. When we do have hearings with people, we listen to them, we make their presentation, and then as a board we vote. So I don't know if that helps, but I think those are the two things that I would like to see, and just have long-term continuity, because as I pointed out earlier, historically, the board was inactive for 8 years. And I'm sure, I don't know, if, Senator Brown, if you recall, but when you're inactive like that, you don't get the tax roll taken care of, and then you cannot issue payments to our owners, and then you don't collect the money. And that's a really hard thing to do. So I try to be mindful of all that when we're going through this. We don't always meet often, but the critical part, we meet when it's really needed.
I was just going to ask you that. I mean, having been there as long as you have, what has been the attendance? Because like I said, this is not a sexy board that
no, it
people
isn't.
want, you know, they're not going to get all their trips all over the world, so.
I think that in September, there's 2 meetings. In October, we have an October 31st. Mm-hmm. I can say that for the most part, we probably are able to meet maybe twice a year, but the most critical part is the October 31st date. And that's a very important date to me because that's Halloween. So I try to remember that on Halloween or sooner, we have to make sure we meet, because they need to provide the information and they have to justify why are we increasing it, and why are they increasing and what's the difference from the year before. So typically, they'll have that information and they'll provide it to us before the board votes. And they'll break it down.
Well, I certainly appreciate your comments on community service because I don't hear that enough these days. We hear all the reasons why people don't want to do things and that money's the only thing that motivates them. We weren't raised in that generation. You know,
No,
we
we
have to
weren't.
have a sense of responsibility and a sense of pride in the work that you do, and more importantly, have a sense of community ownership because the idea that someone else is going to care more than you do about your own community and your own family, I think, is a myth.
Yeah.
I think we need more people that have a sense of responsibility and step up to the plate. Everybody can be the critic sitting on the side thinking they're better.
I agree.
And I'm saying, hey, step into the arena, let's see what you're made of.
Yeah.
And we need more of it. We really do, because we're not going to improve our community. And, you know, I don't know if it just comes with age, but you start reflecting back that there were better days. We had better days when we didn't have all the things that we
Agreed.
have now. And yet we have all this, and we have money floating all over the place, and yet our quality of life as a community is decreased substantially. And that's a concern. I mean, I think we need to, you know, we look at our island, we look how beautiful it is, we look at what we've had the opportunity to inherit, and yet we have younger generations coming up that don't necessarily have that same sense of work ethic or appreciation or community responsibility. You know, it's all about me and take. And we don't want to step forth and give back. And so I appreciate the fact that you brought up those points. I look forward to your nomination being brought on the floor. And thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to ask these questions.
Thank you, Senator Brown, and I hope to continue to live up to helping the community of Guam. So this is just one way I believe I can help.
All right. Thank you, Senator. Speaker Terlaje, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ecube, for your service and public service and experience and mentorship. Can I just ask, you said that this affects your practice, and can you just be more specific? How does working on this board affect your practice?
Well, I think, Speaker, how it really affects me in terms of this is, and I'm sure you know this, many of us, when we do probate cases, we're asked to provide tax assessments that the court will utilize to determine the value of the properties. And so it's really important because with our courts and as the changes in judges, they'll often ask, well, when was the value of this property issued? So that's one part of it. So how it affects me is we want to make sure we continue to do the 5-year evaluation and appraisal because oftentimes it's skewed. So that part helps. The other thing, too, I think is just having a good working relationship with the Board of Equalization through, you know, the real property division. And I think it's great because when I put values, I request for their real property certification statements, and they provide it to me. So that's another great thing. The other thing that it kind of helped, too, at one point is many years ago, I think it was the former Senator Frank Uggan Jr., he was able to introduce legislation where some of these properties were being taxed that were not being utilized. So example, in a probate case, the property is not being utilized, and they got taxed. And I think that it led to changes in the law where it said if the property just remains idle and there's no improvement, no road, no easement, then no real property taxes really would be implemented. And it was very important to me, Speaker, because I handled one of those big properties. And we were in litigation for 13 years.
All right. Do you think there's any conflict in you being a lawyer and serving on this Board of Equalization that is affecting the property values?
I don't believe so, Your Honor. First of all, I always pay my property taxes, and if I'm going to, I don't usually challenge it, number one. So I don't have any other business interests at this point short of my rental properties that would impact me or impede me from carrying out the duties serving on the board.
But your representation of your clients versus your duties to the board, none?
No,
Okay.
none.
What about, so the board's duties really is to ensure that the role is accurate. Does the board have any role in soliciting for the tax assessment or the methodology that will be used in the tax assessment or any of that, how it will be paid?
So my understanding, Speaker, is it's already set by statute how they determine.
Okay.
The thing now that you plug in is the information that's extrapolated from the evaluator and the appraiser to say, hey, we've evaluated, this is it, and then they plug in and there's a formula you follow.
Okay.
We don't do it.
All right. So the reason I'm asking is because when I read the statute, the role of the board is to make sure that the assessment is accurate and to address any appeals as to values of the property, make sure they're accurate based on the information you have before you and the methodology that was used by the appraiser. But I don't see anything, with all due respect, in your role that's to advocate that the government of Guam increase the property taxes every 5 years or every year or whatever.
No.
All of that was dictated by statute that all of it seemed to be within legislative purview, whether it's going to be 5 years or 1 year or every 6 months or every 10 years, whether it's going to be what the rate is going to be, what the exemptions are going to be, all of that set by statute, set by legislatures before us. And so I guess I'm just a little bit, I just want to know if your opinion that we should be raising these every 5 years affects your duties on this board to just determine the rate versus whether we want to bring in more money for the government of Guam. Is that the goal versus really just making sure that those individuals before you are getting a fair rate?
So my understanding and reading of the statute is we're not there to increase it. That's not our role. Our role is to make sure that we're utilizing this, the 5-year the assessment evaluation of the appraiser that's been retained. And once that's done, then they plug in the information and we just follow it. Now we would have applicants, as I've talked earlier, that would say, I don't think I deserve, I don't think I want to do that. So that's different. But our role is not to increase the taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because of some of the statements made earlier, but thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker. So this concludes our questions. If there's no other testimonies or comments, the confirmation hearing is duly heard for Cynthia V. Ecube to serve as a member of the Board of Equalization for a term of 4 years from the date of confirmation. The committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. May 14th. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning. It could be dropped off the mailbox at the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. So again, thank you for agreeing to accept this nomination, and we look forward to a positive confirmation. Ms. Mossy.
Thank you, Chairperson Perez, and to our senators. And go Women Power.
Okay, so at this time, we're going to move on to the next item of the agenda. Thank you very much. We are going to hear testimony on Bill 265-37 COR, sponsored by Speaker Therese M. Terlaje. It's an act to provide tax relief to property owners of R1 and agriculture zones by deferring increases in property tax assessment resulting from the 2024-2025 island-wide property reevaluation. At this time, I'd like to give the floor to the Speaker for opening remarks. Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks for having the hearing on this bill, and thank you for reading the title. And so the title, I hope, explains that the bill is, well, we've heard from the solicitation by the Department of Revenue and Taxation for a new tax appraisal. They are hiring someone to do a reassessment of all the property on Guam. And I was surprised when I saw that because we had taken it out of the 2024 budget. But so when I asked the Director of Revenue and Tax, they said it was being funded now by ARP. So the governor had given ARP money and they were using that to pay for the new assessment. So it's supposed to be a 2024-2025 assessment. So what my bill would do in light of that being solicited or being pursued at this point is it would offset or put a pause on the actual implementation of any of that revaluation on persons who are in certain zones, and it would defer that increase in taxes until the current ownership is transferred. So they might assess your property, but your tax value will not increase until that property is transferred. And this bill 265 would extend this to single-family homeowners on R1, one-family dwelling zone properties, bona fide farmers on A, rural zone properties, and owners of undeveloped R1 or A zone properties. So that's 265. If I could just, to clarify between the two bills, there's a 265, and right after this, there's a 266. What 266 would do is just stagger the implementation of any increases in real property values for the same classes of people. It would, instead of the 10 years that we're catching up, it's going to divide that into 5 years. So the first year, you would get a fifth, second year, another portion, or 20%. For 5 years until the next assessment is due, as opposed to getting that whole giant lump sum increase at once. Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps. I think so.
All right, so we are going to receive testimony for both bills together. I think we'll go ahead and continue with that. So,
can I just say one?
Okay, yeah, Speaker, you're recognized.
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to add. So the intent is to really just offset increase in taxes for these people, because I feel like we are still trying to deal with the impacts of the very high cost of living that really affected our people, particularly after COVID, during COVID, and particularly after Mawar. So I just feel like this is not the time, and I feel like we have excess revenues that we seem to be able to use for things like payroll raises and many other things, and I just feel like I don't want this hardship to be put on the people of Guam when it's not necessary, if it's not necessary. And so, thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Speaker. So this time I'd like to invite anybody who would like to testify for both bills, for Bill 265 and 266-37. So we have, please come to the table, and I'll call out based on the order of sign-in. So we have, I think, Jay Kanata. Okay, and then we have Monty McDowell, Charlie Labrador, Gina Campos, Joey Charfris, Tewid Maraspang, Monica Flores. If there's somebody that I didn't mention, of course, Acting Director Lizama. So we'll recognize you first, Acting Director.
Thank you very much, and I do apologize. My written testimony will follow the hearing. And basically, my testimony will cover both bills. And it's simply this, as you know, based on my other testimonies, we simply comply with the law. So whatever you decide, we will comply. Although some of the staff have kind of given input, and there are certain things that has been brought to our attention, and that is, the revaluation project is, once we commence, it will likely take anywhere from a year to 18 months, and then once it is everything is done and it's assessed. We haven't even assessed, we can't even ascertain what the true fiscal impact is because it hasn't been done. But once it has been done, I believe there was a provision in the proposal that indicated that, any increases likely will not have to be paid until 2026. That was kind of, taking into consideration, the actual start of the project, the completion, and so forth. So the other thing that, one of the other things that was brought to my attention is perhaps maybe there is a different way to kind of accomplish this, and that is, you know, certain, when people have difficulty paying for their property taxes, they do enter into some kind of payment agreement, you know, with the agency. Unfortunately, I don't have the details of that with me, but that is something, you know, that we have. And basically, the other comment was, you know, if you're going to compare both bills, perhaps maybe the easiest for us to try to carry out would be, you know, the actual deferral or deferment. Yeah. Okay. And again, we will provide written testimony at a later time.
Okay, thank you, Acting Director. Next on our list is Jay Kanata. Or is that?
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Kanata. I'm the owner of Inland K Farm. I'm an actual farmer here who probably represent some of the farmers who are afraid to show up. But we've been through a lot here in Guam. We've been through the pandemic where we couldn't even sell our products. We've been hit by typhoon where we lost 100% of our poultry, our vegetation, and et cetera. We don't get as much help needed to get Guam back to sustainability. So all the programs that you guys provided for us, we don't qualify for. Now with this increase in taxes and the delay, I'm very for it. I'm for Bill 26537 because if we do the property taxes assessment and enforce the taxes, you're going to lose a lot of farmers because we're barely making it. We can barely even put food on the table because the power is too high. The water rate went up. Regardless if we have the modified license, it still goes up. Just because modified license can provide discount for water, but doesn't provide discount for power, not even for fuel. I am still at the age where we pull water to the farm because I cannot afford the $80,000 water rate or $80,000 to input pipes to the farm. On top of that, the meter as well, because we can't afford it. So I haul a 250-gallon container from my house to the farm to feed the animals because the government cannot help the farmers. Now you want to increase the taxes? Please don't. Don't hurt the farmers. Don't hurt the people that are in R1, single family, or because we're only a handful of farmers left. From the north to the south, from the east to the west. Now this other bill, 26637, I don't think we should do that yet because I'm asking to delay that more in 2026. Do the assessment, do everything you guys need to do. Tell us how much it's going to cost whatsoever, and let the people who live on Guam say, yes, do it. No, don't do it. Because I know these taxes is needed, but not at this point in time of this world. If you want Guam to be sustainable, if you want Guam to produce its own food and products, don't hurt the farmers. That's all I ask. If you are cabinet members are getting more pay raise, stop the pay raise. Cut your costs. Save Guam. If you can cut your costs and cut your staff and minimize all these hiring, you know, you can use that extra money to help the farmers put in the water they need. Or the telephone poles that cost $8,000 each just to get power. A lot of farmers right now are getting robbed by our own islanders because we can't afford power and water to have someone stay on the farm. Even though we ask for help from GITA, from the SBA, that's a lot of money they're asking us to put up. Because if you miss a payment, SBA, GITA will take away your land because you use your land as collateral for that loan. There's so much that the Department of Ag and USDA can give grants to. Because in return, they want 50% of you to cover the cost. Or they give you a grant that's only like $10,000, $5,000. Not enough for the farmers to help Guam. You know, I would like to see our kids eat fresh fruits, vegetables, meat, eggs from Guam. Products from Guam. But we can't because everybody wants to import. Everybody wants to import the food. If I crack an egg from the States and cracked an egg from Guam, you'll see the difference. The States is rubbery eggs because they're force-fed. Guam eggs are a lot of protein. Protein that our kids need. But all these bills, all these taxes, all these increases, you're hurting us more than we're trying to provide for the island. If your motto as a senator is make Guam good again, help us. We'll give you our votes. But after our votes, don't turn a blind eye on us. We asked for help during typhoon. Only 2 senators came out to my property. And they saw the devastation. You know, my property went flat. I had 6,000 hens dead. I was able to provide eggs during the pandemic, but there was no place to sell it. From the flea market to home delivery, that's all I could do. Because everything was shut down from hotels, etc. I applied for the LEAP program, but I missed it by 1 day. They don't want to bend the rules. And I applied for the LEAP program too. I'm still waiting for an answer because they told me I don't qualify. Then I asked them, I put a letter in for reconsideration. I'm still waiting. I like Senator Parkinson. He helped us last year. He provided $20,000 for the farmers for last year, for after typhoon. Can we do it again? Because we're still recovering. That fence line that's cost more than $20,000 to prevent wild pigs and to prevent human to come in. Can we do that instead? But where's the rest of the senators on this bill? We're all empty. Only see you guys here. Every time we have a public hearing. We need all the senators here to help out. Hear the voices of the people that are working and struggling. You know, but yes, as a farmer and speaking for the farmers who are afraid to come out, yes, we support Bill 265-37, but no, we don't support 266-37. But we do if you delay it further, but not right now. That's all we ask. Thank you.
Duzmasi for your testimony. Next we have Monty McDowell.
Buenos and half a day, Senators. I'm Monty McDowell, I'm the Principal Broker of Advanced Management, and I'm the Chairman of the Guam Association of Realtors Government Affairs Committee. And before I really get started, I'd just like to say that what's not to love about this farmer? What a guy. You're wonderful. Thank you for what you do for us, people of Guam, by growing products out of the soil on the island that we love. And I feel honored being here. I'm sitting next to the acting director, soon to be the director of Revenue and Taxation, just a real wonderful person. And Guam's #1 realtor, sitting right next to me, Gina Campbell. This doesn't get any better than this. And an opportunity to testify on legislation that's good for the people. I was asked by a member of my committee, Charlie Labrador, to read his testimony, and if you don't mind, I will do that, and then I'll follow it by my testimony. I am Charlie Labrador, yeah, right, a realtor and associate broker of Realty One Pacific. I submit this letter to support Bill 265-37 while also advocating for its revision. I think we all recognize that the cost of living has increased substantially over the past 3 years and that income has not caught up. For this reason, I support this bill so as not to add to the financial burden of homeowners who are already struggling financially. At the same time, I believe that Bill 265-37 can and should be revised to extend its benefit to two other segments of society by the application of the same logic and intent behind the bill. One, condominium unit owners. By necessity, condominiums are built on R2 land, but by character, the units are dwellings for single families. In other words, these unit owners are similarly situated as owners of houses in R1 lots. It seems to me that the logic behind the bill likewise applies to condominium unit owners. Two, tenants, particularly those residing in multi-unit apartments. Over the past 3 years, rental costs in Guam have increased by almost 30%. Except for nurses, no other group got a 30% increase in income during that time frame in the public or private sector. If it is the intent of GovGuam to reduce the burden of rent on the population, it should not impose additional taxes on the landlord. Since apartments are by necessity on R2 lots, the bill will add to the next tax burden of the tenant because the landlord will simply pass on his additional costs from increased taxes resulting from revaluation. The effect is even more pernicious for apartments on the verge of the $1 million luxury tax. This will double the property tax on these apartments, as evidenced by what happened when the $1 million tax was imposed. The property owners simply passed on the additional cost to tenants as increased in rental rates. Sinceramente, Charlie Labrador, associate broker. For those who don't understand the $1 million tax, basically in very simplistic terms, when the property value reaches the level of $1 million, the tax that the government of Guam imposes upon the owner of that property basically doubles. And we're opposed to that. We'd like to see that law repealed, and so there is no doubling of the taxes. Senator San Augustine wrote a bill early last year, and it still has yet to be heard. Guam Association of Realtors beg you to please pull that bill out. Let it be heard. On to my testimony. I fully agree. Well, I am here to render support for Bill number 265-37 in opposition to Bill number 266-37. I fully agree with the Bill 265 in reference to property owners' tax will be deferred until such time as ownership is transferred. In recent years, we've seen an exodus of many Guam residents for many reasons. If property tax increases occur as a result of the current property revaluation, it will be but another reason why others will flee Guam. Bill number 265 is a reasonable and well thought out solution to keep that from happening. Simply defer property tax increases until that property is sold. The joy of future ownership will come with it, the new valuation and associated taxes that will certainly be greater than current 2024 taxes. As for Bill number 266-37, a phased-in property tax increase concept will only keep people on Guam for a little longer, but ultimately the tax increase will be unpalatable and some property owners will depart our island. In closing, I reiterate my support for Bill number 265 and opposition to Bill number 266. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Monty, for your testimony. At this time, I'd like to recognize Joey Chafras, if he's here. If there's anybody else, let's see. Tewid Maraspang, you're recognized.
Thank you. For the senators, thank you so much for allowing this time for us to provide our testimony. My name is Tewid Maraspang. I'm the CEO and founder of Pacific Asian Equities. We focus on equitable and sustainable development. I am in full support of 265-37. One is let me just say that taxing. One is there's many other countries that don't do property taxes. Fiji, Vanuatu, Croatia, the Caribbean islands. So we can develop an infrastructure where a model where we can generate revenue to provide for necessary and vital services without doing property taxes. So one is I absolutely like the idea of 265 because those that are landowners and homeowners that own their homes don't have to be taxed out of home ownership and land ownership. You know, we are on an island, a small island where you can feel the consequences, implications of laws. I mean, this is pretty fundamental and pretty easy to see. If you increase taxes, you know, landowners who own 20 acres, 10 acres, 5 acres, 30 acres, they're just not going to be able to keep up with those taxes. And what happens when they can't keep up with those taxes? They're going to have to sell it. But the more important thing is, yeah, it's pretty scary when the government is giving our tax dollars to an appraiser company to appraise and reevaluate our land. To me, that's a very fundamentally dangerous. So an appraiser company that is goal is to make money by appraising land is receiving our tax dollars to appraise, reevaluate property. To me, it seems like a conflict of interest. In my idea, it should be a third party, or it should be a nonprofit agency, or a government agency that is doing those specific reevaluation or appraisal. I mean, I'm just saying, if I'm an appraiser, if I'm an appraiser, and I know that if I'm going to receive millions of dollars from taxpayers or from the government, and my goal is to appraise the value of land, it's a scary situation, because likely they're going to want to make it more higher. When you make the value of land higher, it's very profitable for all that's involved in that industry. So I like the idea that the single-family R1 family homes are being excluded or being deferred. Agriculture, because farmers are very important and they shouldn't be taxed. And then thirdly, the undeveloped lands. But really, I really would like to just see a resolution where we follow other countries where they can generate revenue and provide vital services without having to worry about property taxes. And when you tax property, tax land, it's just, you know, you're putting our people into original landowners into a situation where they're going to lose their land. It's just not sustainable. We're using a model that is dependent on ensuring we're receiving tax money or revenue from people paying their taxes. When people can't pay their taxes, you know, they lose their land. It's almost equivalent to it's a government-sponsored theft. That's how I see it. It's government-sponsored theft. Oh, I'm going to put taxes on your land, and then later down the road, if you can't keep up, I'm going to take that land. It's government-sponsored theft. It's kind of a little bit extreme to say that word, but I mean, how else can you explain it? If you can't keep up with your taxes, I'm going to take it. And then those original owners just are not going to have their own land. And guess what? Somebody with much more money, a foreign investor, is going to end up owning that land. And indigenous folks, indigenous people, I mean, it's happening throughout Oceania and everywhere else. Indigenous people are going to slowly lose their land. So I'm very appreciative that this resolution is here because it's allowing us to think about the implications, consequences of just simply doing these appraisals. Yeah, it's the law, but we got to think about the implications of these laws and what they do. We can't just say, yep, let's check mark and say, let's do our job because that's what we're told to do. No, we have to think about the implications and consequences of what these laws do to original owners, indigenous people, and landowners, and ultimately people that want to call a place home and they're deeply connected to their land. 266637. I support it and I don't support it. I support it in that it's a good solution in allowing folks to catch up with their taxes, but ultimately people should not be paying paying taxes on land. It's a dangerous situation when you're having to rely on people to pay taxes on their land, and when they can't, you take their land is taken away. So for now, we support it, but I do think that it should be maybe deferred much longer. Ultimately, if there's a way, just simply let's look at it and say, why do we need to do these? How are other countries able to sustain their services, government services, without property taxes? There's many ways of looking at things. Many countries, there's different various models of doing things. We shouldn't always be stuck on a specific model of doing things. And so for now, we do support 266 as a way of cushioning folks that are not able to pay their taxes. But ultimately, I would like to just see that be removed. However, I would just like to add that if you're a business and if you're a homeowner, you're a landowner, and you want to make Guam a home, you shouldn't be paying taxes on your land, because then if you can't keep up, you lose that. You lose your ability to call a place home and build your family and build your community. However, if you're a business and you're generating lots of money and you're generating money off the resources of the island, I think you should be taxed. Unless if you're generating certain revenue and you're having a difficult time creating that revenue, maybe that should be deferred a few years, 3 or 4 years until you're making that revenue. But ultimately, my philosophy is, and the folks at Pacific Asian Equity is, if you're a business and you're generating lots of revenue on the resources and the business activity on the island, you should be taxed. So that way that tax can continue to support the infrastructure that allow that business to generate revenue. That is all I have. Thank you, Senators. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, David, for your testimony. I'd like to recognize Gina for your testimony.
Madam Chair, Speaker Terlaje, Senator Brown, Senator Taidagui, thank you for giving us the opportunity to voice our opinion. I'm here in support of Speaker Terlaje's Bill 266-37, introduced on April 8, 2024, an act to delay the implementation of property tax increases for R1 residential property owners, farmers, and owners of undeveloped R1 and A-zone property. It was these particular words in her bill that got my attention and motivated me to come today. This resulting economic strain may exacerbate the existing housing shortage. Being in real estate, I have the opportunity to talk to people every day about this issue. As a realtor, I see firsthand the impact of good intended government policy and current economic conditions on our housing market and its citizens. The words in Speaker Terlaje's bill indicate to me that our legislature recognizes the housing situation on our island. I am here to support the path that you are on, Senators, but I'm also here to advocate that all residential owners and all undeveloped landowners should also get the same help. A large majority of our homeowners are on A-zone lots, and I need help understanding the concept of distinguishing one group from another. If the government is looking to defer the implementation of the tax hikes, I ask that the assistance apply to everyone, much like the GPA allotment that was given to everyone, including commercial account holders. I am also here to ask that our senators look again at Bill 175-37, introduced in September 2023. This bill was introduced to establish a new Type 4 toilet facility as an option for landowners who currently are restricted, and not by the law, but by policy under EPA, and cannot currently build on their land. These owners also need help. There are some conditions in Guam that our senators cannot control when addressing the cost of building housing. I understand that. But many other things are within the power of the legislature, and your actions can turn the tide when it comes to building homes in Guam. Small steps like passing this bill and Bill 175-37 are some of those actions that you are in control of, Senators. Perhaps sponsoring a bill that will put timelines on government agencies' issuance of building permits is another step, moving towards affordable housing. Perhaps look at asking the governor of Guam to allocate the $2 million from the Federal American Rescue Plan funds as a down payment towards extending sewer lines throughout the island. That is another mechanism that the legislature is in control of. Small actions within your power can lead us towards affordable housing. Thank you for the time.
Senators Masi. At this time, I'd like to recognize Monica Flores.
Good afternoon, Senator Perez, Speaker Terlaje, Senator Taigui, and Senator Brown. Thank you so much for allowing testimony on the two bills introduced by the Speaker, Bill 265 and 266-37. I share a lot of the same concern as everybody on this panel, and I really appreciate the Speaker's speed in responding to the Governor's decision to use ARP funds to start this land evaluation, and in responding with such speed to that development. I was shocked to find that the Governor was using emergency relief funds to spearhead this land evaluation, and I did see it, as a friend on the just mentioned, as a publicly funded death sentence in a way, you know, for people who wish to call Guam home but who can't afford to stay here and are forced to relocate or are forced to sell their property to survive. We know, all of us in this room know, that we have many families in Guam who are technically land rich but cash poor, and every year we do hear of families who, you know, who for many years have not been able to pay property taxes, having their lands be claimed by the government of Guam. I support Bill 2655, and again, thank you for introducing this bill, Speaker. I think it's pretty straightforward. I'll just keep it short and sweet. I agree that R1 zones need to be protected, and I also agree with some of the sentiments that were mentioned earlier, that definitely we need to consider some R2 zones as well for that same protection. As far as Bill 226 goes, I definitely support the intent of the bill. I do it is hard, though, to believe that families are going to be able to pay that tax increase within a 5-year period, 100% of that tax year increase within a 5-year period. You know, yes, and we understand that it is the law every few years to do these evaluations, but it's alarming to know that we're paying for, you know, an industry to lead the evaluations, and it seems like, you know, from anybody looking at this from the outside, that it could be tipped in the favor of those who stand to profit from selling a lot of land very quickly. And so thank you so much for introducing both of these bills, and for just acting with the speed that you acted to protect people. It is hard to live here. It's hard to afford rent. A lot of us are being outpriced from living in our own homelands. A lot of people who are born and raised here can no longer stay here. We've seen a mass exodus very recently, population decrease because surviving here day to day is so challenging. And so any increase to land taxes would definitely exacerbate an already highly dangerous situation. We have a growing number of houselessness here, of houseless individuals, a majority of whom are indigenous Chamorro and other Pacific Islander. We have, you know, if we look at the people who are on waiting lists for public housing programs, they're extremely long. The waiting time is unbearable for a lot of people. We see people sleeping in their cars, giving their children to CPS, volunteering their children to CPS because they can no longer safely house them, and hoping to be reunited with their children once they have secured safe housing. And so all of those issues need to be considered whenever there's a tax increase to land, and whenever there's, you know, a large publicly funded land evaluation. $2 million in public funds could go to many other much needed emergency things. We saw a water crisis last year after the typhoon, and we have to, you know, a lot of people still haven't returned back to normal life since the typhoon, whether it's, you know, living in a safe home, or even maybe even having to lose a job because businesses closed down after the typhoon. We still haven't recovered from COVID-19 economic loss. And so all of that is compounded now. And so this move was alarming. So appreciate the move for these protective measures for our community. And thank you so much.
Masi. I'd like to recognize Melanie Guerrero at this time.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. Senator Therese Terlaje, Senator Brown, and Senator Taigui. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunities to speak today. Actually, I came here today because I'm a residential R1 homeowner, and also my neighborhood is about more than 100 homes where I have neighbors that are Manamkus who are retirees that live in this subdivision, who live on fixed incomes, and just looking at my tax bill based on that, and I do have a background. I'm a real estate professional. I'm a real estate broker as well, and from what I know and what I can see based on, or what I can foresee, is if this assessment does go through, I'm concerned about when the implementation will take place, and I do know that this is government law every 5 years. Is that correct? So you guys do have some control over that, as far as that, making some changes, maybe thinking about doing that, because it is going to directly impact families like myself who do struggle also. In spite of my profession, we do struggle with the impact of inflation, food, mortgages, providing for our children. it's education, all of that that matter to every one of us that do live here on Guam, and especially those that have fixed incomes. I'm gonna say that based on what I do know, I'm seeing that my property value will increase, which will affect the tax that I'm going to be paying. I'm going to see double that, and that's a lot to take in for my family and the families that do live in the area where we stay, which a lot of homeowners there are not selling very often. We like our subdivision. There's a low amount of people that actually sell in that subdivision. And a lot of my neighbors and surrounding me, they are elderly retirees. I hope that I do support the bill of 265 on keeping us not being impacted as the homeowner, and that being deferred for as long as we own the property. That actually, I don't want to sell my property. I want to pass it down to generations, my children, because Guam is our home regardless, and I know that they want to stay here too. I don't intend to sell my property because that's going to be passed down to generations, and this is going to really impact in the future if some changes can't be considered as far as maybe extending the 5-year to, I mean, we already did 10 years, right, of no evaluation. I understand there's a law of 5 years, but maybe because you have some control of that, I think we're really going to be depending on you guys to take a look at that further to make adjustments. I understand that it does support public health, education, all of that, but what we're paying now is still pretty substantial in consideration of everybody that it's affected. I do support Bill 265, but also please consider the extension. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's on the 266. Yeah, so as far as deferring the 5-year, escalating every year, I think that's where I'm thinking that might, that should be reconsidered, right, and take a look at again on extending that timeline. Since we went already 10 years, why not? Why can't we maybe take a look at amending that 5-year law to 10 years? I mean, we already did it, and right, we did it already, so maybe extending that period, if you would consider that, that would help. Because right now, nowadays, every dollar does count for us, and everyone that is living in Guam is impacted, no matter what profession you're in. We're all suffering in some way, and we do know families that are suffering as well. So I do support that the first bill on 265, and also I agree with Monte and Gina on extending that for everyone else, not just A zones, R1. Consider the rest of the categories that are going to be impacted as well, and make it fair to them. On the second part of, I do support 266, but ask that you consider extending the timeline to consider the impact that it's already having on all the families on Guam and businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for your testimony. Jay, do you have additional supplemental testimony? Okay, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Senator. Here's my questions to the Senator, the Director, and also the Governor, Lieutenant Governor is watching. how much ARP funds is used to hire a person to assess the
Sorry.
property?
Yeah, at this point, we're accepting testimony,
Oh,
so it's not a
okay.
question or answer.
Here's my testimony.
from-
If you guys gonna hire someone to do that, what's the use of having Department of Land Management? Why can't they use their government power to do the assessment rather than using the ARP? Why can't you use the ARP to the most needed areas? That's my question. I want to see if you guys can address that with the governor. But all in all, please reconsider about using the 266-37, not just a 5-year, but use it as a 10-year extension-wise. If we did it this past 10 years, do it again this next 10 years. And gradually increase it, not to hurt us. Every dime, every penny counts. You know, one penny can really help the family for all the struggles we're going through, especially with the power. Thank you.
Cynthia Masi, and thank you for being here and providing your testimony. This is very helpful on these policies that were put forward. So at this time, I'd like to recognize the speaker if she has questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Director, if I could ask, what is the status of the revaluation right now, and how much is it expected to cost?
So we had already, we had put out the RFP. We received some bids. We're in the evaluation stage of the process.
Did you award? That means you...
Not yet. Oh,
you're evaluating,
we're evaluating
the bids?
Yes.
You mean the proposals?
The proposals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a price?
We were expecting it to cost about $2 million.
Okay, yeah, I looked it up in 2014, it cost $2.5 million. And you have that much ARP funds that's been transferred for this purpose?
Yes, we do.
And you mentioned something about the increases not taking effect until 2026. Is that in the RFP?
Yes.
Okay. So when do you expect the evaluation to be done?
We are hoping to be done before mid-month, which is really soon.
No, I mean, okay, so you're expecting to award by mid-month, mid-May, and how long do they have to complete?
Probably have a contract signed in June, perhaps, and then start the work, and then it takes approximately 18 months.
Oh, you said 1 year to 18 months.
1 year
okay.
to 18 months, yes.
All right, then. Okay, and your expectation that this will not be effective until 2026?
Correct.
Okay. So, yeah, I want to thank all of you for your testimony. It's very helpful. And Gina, you're correct. I mean, you're all correct that, yeah, I did intend to do housing, and it should extend to R2 housing. I mean, sorry, A zone housing. And if I can figure the language to extend it to condos and tenants and rental units, I would try to do that. I do agree. The reason why I put 2 bills in is because it was not explained to us the purpose of the increased taxes. So in past years, it was very clear we're going to pay for reevaluation, and any increased property values that come in from this reevaluation are dedicated to these specific purposes. But we don't see that. At least I haven't been told those things, that none of the legislature has publicly. So that to me would be more compelling. And so I put both bills in to see if there's any compelling testimony that would be provided today to say this is why we really need it, because we're going off on this project and we need this much more money that we're expecting to bring in by this reevaluation to be dedicated towards these projects. All we've been told in general is that reevaluating the property very likely is going to increase the property value and increase the government's ability to borrow or to take out debt. And without that being further explained, I'm not willing to do that, I guess, at this point. And I do agree, though, that it's compelling to me because I hear testimony like you, Ms. Guerrero, every day about how the struggles the people are having. It's why we continue to look at power credit extensions, liquid fuel tax. We've pretty much done away with the majority of the liquid fuel tax for customers paying those. And wherever we can, like as Gina says, to cut those things that we can control, because there were so many things that increased that we could not control. And so we're just going to continue to do that. I'd like to continue to do that, and in particular, because of the prices of housing that have been quoted to us, right, by the professionals. We've gone from, I think, the 10 years ago, I asked my staff to pull some of these, and it was, I know they're saying now the median price of a house is $400,000. I think that's what, well, let me just be more accurate. I have it here somewhere. Let's see, sorry. Or I'll come back to that in my closing, just the prices. The difference between the 10 years ago and now, and that's all of it because of shortage of housing. Shortage of sewer, as you say, and I agree with you, absolutely. That's another thing that I want to, credit chairperson, that she has actually moved several measures to force the expansion of sewer lines out to these places. I'm trying to push legislation that will get USDA funding for sewer lines as well into CLTC properties, but she's done that for other properties. We've had so many discussions regarding GWA's use of the infrastructure funds, of ARP funds, and where would they be able to push sewer out to. So I just hope those come to fruition, right? So we've heard a lot of plans. However, I did hear something the other day that said, I said, how would we be putting this $100 million infrastructure in if we built the hospital in Barragata? And the answer was that we're going to redirect from other projects to put it there. And I'm not so sure about that. So I'd like to know exactly which projects they are going to move on in the next year. And I think they laid out their plan to the chairperson in the hearing the other day. And which ones, can we expand upon then? If they, we just have to work together on that. But anyways, I appreciate all of your testimony. I worry about the impacts of increasing property taxes in general because of our history of the property taxes and loss of land and loss of ownership. And while some people might say it's minimal, but when it's not an income-producing property and you're on a fixed income, it's everything, right? So anyway, situs masi to all of you, and thank you for your work in farming, and thank you for continuing to do that despite the hardship. I really appreciate that and admire you for that. Situs masi to all of you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker. Yes, so I think this bill is, Bill 265, I think is, I prefer that bill over the other one too as well. I think, yeah, it's so important. I mean, hearing you speak about the difficulties of having to deal with rising costs and taxation, if we can do that, if we can delay it for our people, then I think that would be good. And considering the history too as well, that's how many of us have lost our land, our families have lost land to being unable to pay for taxes, and when it wasn't even a capital economy, right? It was agrarian bartering kind of system. I guess the question too, in regards to implementation of this bill, this is for acting director. It states undeveloped R1 or A zone properties. So what is your understanding of what undeveloped means for A zone, for instance?
I apologize, I don't have anybody here from that division, but my definition of that would likely be something that just has no structure, no infrastructure, something that is just lying there, just has no current use or, you know, is not currently in use. That's my definition of that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this also, I guess, from an environmental perspective, that's a plus, because we don't want to tax, you know, this idea that, you know, you have to, you know, use your land to make more money. And, you know, when we, you know, some of the issues is, let's just keep it in its pristine state, let's protect it. I think we're losing so much of that on Guam, and it's really important that we don't, because of, you know, all these issues with climate change. You know, the more we take away from the land, the more exposure to the land to, you know, now we're experiencing El Nino, right? El Nino, and we're feeling this drought period. The vegetation there is really is a protective factor, and something it's very difficult that, you know, to recreate something like that, and something we take for granted. In regards to Bill 175, we are working to finalize that, so it should be out. Yeah. Okay, and then I have no questions at this time, so I'd like to open up to the floor. Senator Tadigui, if you have any comments or questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, or almost good evening, right? Thank you so much for sticking it out on this very important piece of legislation and being here, taking the time out. I greatly appreciate the comments that were made. I had a chance to talk to Monty outside to listen more to his testimony, you know, just one-on-one. And I've probably been the most outspoken person when it comes to the exodus of what's happening on our island, from 175,000 people, you know, before COVID down to 155 right now. And it's continuing to drop as we see that most businesses can't even bring in people in to work for their companies. We even heard someone testify, I think, recently about how hard it is to get employees to come and work. So it's become very difficult on this island. And the last thing we need to do is to create legislation or anybody considering raising prices at this point on anything. So I am quite concerned. And here we are having $2 million, just like you were saying earlier, that's going to be spent from ARP funding for a project that, if this bill should pass, Acting Director Lizama, if this bill should pass, then will you continue with this RFP to go out to get someone to come in to do the appraisal? Or do we have not any control as a legislature to stop that from happening?
To my understanding, in that RFP process, once you get past a certain step, you can't retract or kind of cancel the RFP process. So we're right now we're at the evaluation stage. So once we start to open bids, then I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're not able to go back and cancel that process.
And it was mentioned earlier that you're planning on opening this bid in mid
We're
May?
actually ready to do that sometime this week. We've just been kind of, you know, busy, and we needed to appoint people to actually, you know, assign people to actually open it.
Mm-hmm. You know, what I did was looked at some of the funds that was generated from property taxes to see if there's been a decline, and considering the mass exodus of individuals, you know. But if you look at the BBMR report, you're not seeing a decline in taxes for the TAF at all. So it makes you wonder why then? Why are we increasing these taxes on property when you're not seeing the amount of funds that, I mean, this government has grown so much. If you look at the last 3 years in budgets and seeing there's really not much change, let's put away the federal funds and not talk about that, but talk about what we generate in taxes and fees and fines from here on this island. We're not seeing it drop. So why are we increasing the taxes? Doesn't make any sense at this point. When you brought up earlier, Ms. Flores, when you brought up earlier, which it just resonated to me, you know, the part when you said they're outpricing. They're outpricing us. That just totally resonates with me. We're losing our lands because of this. And we're seeing it without these taxes going up. You know, many people, like you said, they're land rich but cash short. well, if we do this, we're going to see a lot of that land rich no more and still cash short. So what are we doing to our island? We need to really assess this. You know, I don't really like Bill 266 at all as my, because like Monty, I asked him that question about it, and I agree. We're going to lose a lot more people. And talk about losing tax base, that's when we're really going to feel it. Right now, I don't see a decline in taxes. And if you look at the BBMR report, you'll notice that too. So I greatly appreciate you taking the time out, everyone, being here and speaking. And bringing your point of view. Gina, please, go ahead. I always like to recognize you.
Senator Taidagui, I just have one final comment. We're addressing the issue with people leaving island because of the cost of housing and everything else, and a lot of that is, like, for me personally, a lot of this is out of my control. But there are some things that the government could do to help the private sector, and one of those things is to encourage and promote the idea of developing more housing, because when you have too much of a product on your market, there is no other way except to bring down the cost of that product to move it. The problem we have here is that we've demonized developers, and we have made the environment more important than the ability of people to live on their land. And the ability to live on your land demands that we, to some degree, clear some of that property and build housing. And we just have made that such an ugly thing. We don't promote it as much as we should. And I'm saying, we should treat the symptom, because the symptom is we don't have enough houses being built on the island. And the military just came out a couple of weeks ago, and they are promoting the idea of the private sector partnering up for them to build. They need 7,000 homes. They need 7,000 homes to be built on island, and they're actively promoting a partnership with the private sector to build those homes for their people. And when I say their people, I don't mean foreigners. I mean our people. Any military family that moves to Guam is our people. They promote the island, they bring in businesses. I do not believe Donkey would have opened up if they weren't anticipating the military buildup. Nobody is going to come to our island and support our local people and give us places to go for our children and to go and eat and to go and entertain ourselves if it wasn't for the buildup. And so when I say our people, I mean the military people, I mean foreign people, I mean people who want to come on island and live here. But we have to start addressing the problem, and the problem is we don't have inventory. So if the federal government's going out there and promoting the idea of building for the people that are going to be on the military bases, our government, you senators, have to get out there and promote the idea that developers build for the rest of us working class people in the community. Because if we don't have that, a lot of us can't build for ourselves. We don't have the capital or the ability. My son just finished his house, and it cost him $40,000 to get water for one house. Thank God he's got his parents to help him out. But not every person in our community has that ability. And yes, we're going to have to start looking at this as a partnership. The private sector is your partner, and you are ours. Can't we just get together and address the issue? And the issue is not property taxes. It is the building more homes, promoting the idea that we've got to build more homes. Because when those 7,000 people come here, they're going to displace the people that are already here. That's really the root of this issue, is we don't have enough houses, and we're not promoting and encouraging and working towards that goal. We're not. We're just addressing the little tiny symptoms that don't address the big picture. So please, senators, you are our partners and we are yours. Can we please find a way to work towards that goal? Because that's really the problem we have.
Thank you, Ms. Campos. And I definitely hear you. And I want to make sure that if we do this, that we're protecting our environment as well. We got to make sure that we're not just, loading up our island and destroying parts of our island just for the sake of, building the military buildup, and I hear what you're saying, but there's got to be a balance. I mean, we've got to promote more farmers too. It's not always about building homes. It's about, having farmland for our people to be sustainable and this island to be sustainable. So I do hear you. I mean, I'm trying very hard to work with you. I'm looking at that 3D printing type of home building, everything that I've been working with dealing with our homes here. So other than that, oh, you wanted to say something that's...
It's not just building houses. It's not just paying taxes. It's protecting the land. It's protecting the beauty. It's providing food for the people that's right now here in the island. I understand we were not ready for this build-up. Guam is not ready for this build-up. There's no property for this build-up. But the taxes, the main concern is the taxes. You implement these taxes, a lot of land, a lot of houses will be available because no one can live on it no more. Have you guys gone around the island? So many families lost their houses. So many houses are empty. So many property right now in front of the mall is cleared. That devastation, killing the trees, clearing the property, that might be a development. Just recently, in the newspaper, there's a $700,000, $600,000 houses project up for sale. Who could afford that? Just the military. No one can afford the $700,000 to $600,000 houses they're going to build. I do apologize. And yes, it costs $50,000 to $80,000 just to get the water hookup. GWA requires you to put in 100 feet of 6-inch pipes, then reduce it to 2-inch pipes. So that's a lot of money. On top of that, you still got to pay taxes. Just recently, right after the typhoon, I had revenue tax come to my property. They wanted to tax me on a canopy that's on my property. They want to tax me for a container that had been destroyed from typhoon. Things that they want to tax me, I say, wait a second, I'm undeveloped. I'm a farmer. I'm a modified farmer. Here's my license. I'm not supposed to be taxed. But they still came to my property. They didn't care about what happened to me, but they wanted more money from me. They wanted to tax me on my farming business. I even told them, I'm just a farmer. I can barely pay for feed. Feed used to be $20, now it's $35, $40. So where do we get the feed? We get it from other stores. Scrap. Make our own feed. Taxes is everywhere. We're not going to run away.
Yeah.
But we cannot make Guam the skeleton no more. We've got to keep our people on the island. If you go to the States, they probably got 400,000 Chamorros out there. Millions, too. More than what we have right now. We used to have a lot of farmers back in the 80s. What happened? They all stopped because they couldn't afford the taxes, couldn't afford the water rate, couldn't afford the power rate. Nobody wanted to buy the fruits because everybody's doing the same thing. We only have a handful left, and I'm one of them. I'm picking up the traits from what I learned when I first came to Guam. I went to an Iran festival this past weekend. There was less farmers putting out their products. It hurts because Guam's known to help each other. Hey, there's a banana. You want banana? I'll give it to you. Don't steal it. You need eggs? We'll give it to you. Just ask. But now the government wants to tax us. ARP should use for something else. We have Department of Land Management. What should you have in Department of Land Management? They should be doing the assessment. Use their skills to do the assessments on Guam. That's what they're paid for. They do all the mahons on Guam. They do the rates. Use them instead of contracting the money out. Is that what Department of Land Management is for? Or is it just there for what? Use our taxpayers, use our manpower that's there already. But yes, it's hard. We were not ready for this military build-up. Because there's no houses, there's no land for them to build houses. Unless they take the land away from the private sector and the original landowners. Or kick people off to more land trust properties and build more houses. Be careful what we ask.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Kenneth. I highly recommend you let the farmers, your other fellow farmers, know about what's going on here, because we definitely need their testimony and have them send in testimony to the chairperson. As much as you can, I appreciate it, and all the hard work you do. What you do is amazing. Being a farmer, it's so rewarding. Oh my gosh. I come from a family of farmers, Taiguis, from Talofofo and Inulahan, so it's very hard work. I appreciate what you do. But again, I thank you again, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to make some comments, and Maria, if anything, I recommend that we get this, actually have a emergency session, because I'd like to see that $2 million going to something that we can use right now if the intention of this bill passes. And there's really no need for that $2 million to go to something like this. It can go somewhere that's more important that we're lacking. So maybe go into an emergency session and deal with this, Marie, so you don't have to waste that $2 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tadigui. Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's given me a lot of time to think while I'm sitting here and hearing the testimony that's been provided this afternoon and the reality of where we're at. I definitely support this bill. I'm just commenting to the speaker, if the governor vetoes it, I'm curious if the legislature will override. This is not our proposal to do an evaluation at this time and increase land tax. None of us here are proposing it. The fact that the governor is choosing to use these AARP funds to pay for this, I'm sure there's a reason. Let's be clear. I'm sure the motivation is to want to increase the value of the land, because then what can you do with that? You can increase your borrowing. I'm sure that's the motivation. This isn't being done for no reason. And the fact that AARP funds, which we have repeatedly said could be used for more critical current needs as a result of the pandemic, are used for things like this. And then they argue that they can justify this, and yet we're asking why aren't they used for critical things that our people need. They have umpteenth reasons why not. You are dealing with the reality of different perspectives here in your own government. The administration is living with all the money. They're basking in it. They're basking in it so much they can give $20,000 and $30,000 pay raises in the last 2 years. That's a reality. That's your government for you. That's what you voted for. So I'm all for this bill. I'm thinking I got to go to Rev and Tax and get my senior discount, because I pay several $100s a month in addition to my mortgage on insurance and taxes, land tax on the house that I live in, as many people do. That just really increases your mortgage rate that you have to pay on top of everything else. So that's a reality a lot of people are dealing with. And you, sir, Mr. Kanata, the issues you're bringing, they're really talking about grassroots into the land. Your government's totally disconnected from you, because in the last few years, the cost of this government's gone up by probably $100 million or more annually. Because we voted for all the raises and everything else. Not all of us did, some of us did, but enough that it passed. And I hope that the people of Guam are going to be able to afford the government of Guam. I'm not going to be here down the road to worry about it. Others will. Good luck to them, because we have made long-term obligations on short-term revenue. And you see how quickly this government loves to spend your money. And the other thing I've been thinking to myself, I look around and I go, we've had the most money in the history of the government of Guam. We have the highest paid directors in the government, and the highest paid government in the history of the government of Guam. And I ask myself, I ask my family, I ask you, what is better in your life? We've never had this much money flowing through our hands. What is better? All I know is I'm going to the bank machine a couple more days a week than I normally would because I'm out of cash. And I'm talking just basic groceries, same old gas the car, just your basic obligations of life. I'm sure everybody else is doing that. Fortunately, so far, there's money in the bank machine. But, at some point, you're starting to look at it and going, wow, what's going on here? But your government has no concept of that because your government continues to spend. And on what, I don't know, because I will sit here through a budget hearing and GPD will come and tell me I don't have enough police officers. We will have DOE come here and tell we don't have enough money for our students. We don't have enough money for one-on-one aids that we need for our children with disabilities. The list goes on. So that I ask you, because we've had no control of AARP fund, no matter how often we have come, no matter how often we've gone into session to try to get direction on where that money should go that we see is more critical, we get ignored. Because the governor says that's her decision on how she has spent that money the way she wants to. So you decide that. But I will support this. I will definitely support the 265. I like this bill. Maybe Speaker, the other bill we're not going to support. Or maybe the Speaker will not have that bill move forward. And we will pass it and watch what the legislature does. If the governor vetoes it, well, so far there's 6, maybe 7 now members of this legislature that so far I've yet to see, maybe I got to go back and look at the record if I'm wrong, my goodness, I'll be corrected, have not overridden a veto. Maybe they're the ones you need to talk to because they're not sitting up here today. Most days they're not sitting here. So I leave that to you. I appreciate what you've told us. I do hear what you say. And you're on point with the realities of what you and your families are dealing with out there. That's the reality, really, of what's happening to most of our people on Guam. So you have my support on definitely 265. I will support that. But watch and see what your legislature does. It's election season. Who knows? They might change their mind and vote on an override. We'll see. Some people are political chameleons. They change to whatever color they need to be. But I have no further comment. I have no questions. I appreciate all the information that's been provided by everyone here that's provided their testimony, Madam Chair, and I certainly will be very supportive of Bill 265. I think we all recognize that the cost of living and everything else has gone up very much in the last few years, not just by a few dollars and cents, by hundreds and thousands of dollars. It's getting, no doubt, very expensive to live here. And I don't think of the government now that has been so flush with so much money, that it has so much excess that we have directors, tongue-in-cheek, almost laughing at us with their rate, their increases, that they have no shame during this time. They have no shame about it. But that's for the people to decide ultimately. So thank you. I appreciate your input today. You've definitely got my thought process going. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Speaker Terlaje.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask if anyone in this panel has any reason to believe that the reevaluation will result in a decrease in value for any property on Guam. Will it result in a decrease? Because I'm going on the assumption that
of course it's going to be a substantial increase.
Increase, right? Yes. I just want to know if the real estate.
It's going to be a heck of an increase.
All right, yes.
Everything's gone up, but the bill 265 is just a wonderful way of, so as my new farmer friend, I was explaining to him that if you inherited your property, for example, it could be a curse that you could barely just hang on to what your family has left you, the legacy, and so you're just barely surviving. And now we did a revaluation, and then here comes the new taxes. But this is the way around it. Basically, it grandfathers the property owner, so there's no problem that you inherited that property. I'll just give you an example. In the North Shore of Oahu is Haleiwa. There's only 2 families there that are original landowners nowadays. The joke is they want to change the name to Haleiwa, But one of my friends, they have the property. They pay $16,000 a month in tax for property. It's right along the main street as you go through. Well, it just seems to me like this would be the kind of bill that would have made their life a lot easier, because they could have lived, the Hawaiian and the Hawaiian property, so to speak, and until such time as they convey it. And then the person, when you convey it, you know when you're at the title company exactly what the consequences of this purchase is going to be. It's going to come with this reevaluation tax increase. And we're supposed to do a reevaluation, I believe, every 5 years. We're already at the 10-year. We need to do the revaluation, but I think this is a good opportunity with Bill 265. It doesn't mean we have to implement it. Right now we do. If we don't do anything, it will just automatically, all our taxes will come up, and there we go from the 175 down to the 155,000 population down to 145, and the ship is sailing, and it's taking our neighbors on it. You know. And could I just ask that anything that's real estate centric, if you'd be kind enough, because we all know each other, you know, fortunately, because small island, that since I'm in the Guam Association of Realtors, I am the chairman of the Government Affairs Committee. If somebody from your staff could shoot me anything so I could disseminate it, get the committee together, brilliant minds in it. You know, you've got the Chris Felix and the John and Liz Duenas and you know, Faber Spicio and all those people, and then we could write a joint opinion. Of course, they all seem to be in Washington, D.C. this week for the legislative overviews of the real estate issues across the nation. And so I found out about it late last night, you know, while on the treadmill at the gym, trying to keep the old man going. So do the best we can. I thank Gina for showing up with me and my fellow broker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, so I just used the past audit that showed the increase from when there was a 10-year delay in the previous revaluation. The increase at that time was significant. And then I went and I looked at the census between 2010, 2020. We can get those values. That's a 28% increase. But more, I think, specific was the Guam PDN article, where they lay out for 2013, the average or the median prices for houses was $200,000, and then this is an article in October 2023, and it says at that time the prices were $450,000. So that's a 107.5% increase, more than double in the 10 years. I think they may be quoted now at 2024 at 400,000 instead of 415,000, a slight decrease, but still a doubling in 10 years. And that is significant. That is a big risk for these property owners who are, and again, I can't tell the governor how to spend her ARP funds. She's made that very clear that she will not hear us in that regard. We can't tell her spend it on the hospital instead of this. So the $2 million is going into this, and so this is my way of trying to find a workaround of how we could, despite what she spends the ARP funds on, how we can impact the lives of the people who might be significantly impacted by this revaluation. And I appreciate the testimony on both bills. Again, I intended that only one go forward, and just wanted to make sure that there was no compelling reason, and we have heard none today, as to why we needed to see this increase valuation, or what, how they intended to spend that increased valuation. There has been no testimony provided and no plans given to us. And no consensus in that regard either. The current reductions that are in current statute and current exemptions, I expect to continue after the revaluation. Those should continue, not be impacted by either the revaluation or this bill. So, yeah, I just want to ensure that, yeah, while we're seeing this increased costs of living on Guam, it's very difficult. Some people say, we have the lowest property taxes compared to the states. I just find that irrelevant for our purposes, because we have a housing shortage, we have housing prices that are beyond our reach, we have cost of living that is in many ways beyond our reach, we have people leaving to the place that maybe has higher real property taxes for, you know, these other reasons. And so we just have to keep the cost down. And I agree, we need to find ways to encourage the building of houses. And I think that's what we're trying to do by getting the sewers out to these places. And that's what we're trying to do by getting sewer and infrastructure out in the Chamorro Land Trust properties as well, those properties that we can control. And again, so thank you. I'm very, very grateful for your testimony. Yes, Director.
I apologize. I do have some additional comments to make. You know, in going around the room, I did hear some comments about property being confiscated due to non-payment. And unless I've missed something, I don't believe that any property has been confiscated due to delinquent property taxes, and that hails back to even the previous administration. So, you know, I kind of want to allay some fears of those who have testified here today. Additionally, Senator Brown mentioned something that I was going to actually remind Ms. Melanie, especially for those who are her Menomco neighbors. If it is, if the home is owner occupied, they can certainly go and apply for the senior exemption. We do have some exemptions in place, and you're welcome to come and see our real property tax or division. So the other thing is, I did speak to Mr. J during the break, and you know, and asked him to reach out to me, and we will certainly look into the concerns that he has.
There should be a farmer's, there is a,
Yes.
if you use your property for 8 months type of farmer's clause as well. Yes, thank you, Director. Again, thank you, Madam Chair, for having this hearing so promptly. And thank you for all of you for really taking a lot of time to testify today, waiting for the previous hearings and staying this whole time. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. I just have one question. So in regards to the language of the bill, it says the deferral shall remain in effect for the current landowner until such time as the ownership of the property is transferred. So what is your thoughts about, so I know, let's say, you know, the parent dies, transfers the land to the children. What are your thoughts about perhaps deferring it when that type of transfer happens versus selling it to somebody, you know, non-relative? What are your thoughts about that to the panel? Yes, yes, Tewid.
Thank you for allowing us to comment. I was kind of thinking about that. I think it should be reworded, because yeah, I see why you're asking that question, right? If your parent dies and you want to be able to transfer it, I think it should be reworded where, you know, they should maintain that deferral of taxes. If your goal is to pass it on, so that way your family can maintain a home ownership and continue their community, then that tax should be deferred. But if you're selling it to make a profit, then that should be something different. That's my thoughts on that.
Maybe Acting Director, any thoughts about that? I know the language is going to be tricky here because it'd be difficult to find some language.
We'll reach out to your office and kind of work on that. As I mentioned before, we really prefer to stay away from crafting policy. So, but thank you, ma'am.
How about Jay, and then I'll recognize Gina.
I say defer it for 5 years. Within the 5 years, if there's an intent to sell, then the inherited person will be taxed for that. By, you know, make sure in the verbiage is there. They have within the 5 years, or deferred within 5 years, but carry on the same rate. In the event within that 5 years, the inherited individual who try to sell will not be honored that deferral.
Yeah, thank you. Gina, I know you wanted to chime in.
You know, we have family in California and the way they do it there, and I don't always look to California as a good example, but in this case, what they do is, as long as the property is transferred to an immediate family member, the assessed value remains at the amount that, like for instance, if I'm the parent and I pass it on to my kids, it remains at, the assessed value is the value that my parents had. So then the tax remains the same. It's very minimal. And that has helped a lot of my husband's family be able to keep the homes. They just passed it down to the kids, and that way the kids were able to enjoy the benefits of the reduced tax value because it was based on their parents' tax amount. And that's really helped them a lot. If it wasn't for that, they couldn't afford to continue living there. So that was a benefit.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yes, Taywin.
I'll just go back to saying that, again, land should not be taxed. If your goal is to create a community in the home, land should not be taxed. What's the purpose? What is the purpose of taxing? So we can generate revenue to provide government services. Again, I'm just going to go back. There's many countries that don't do property taxes and still are able to provide government services. So I think we have to go back to fundamentally reassessing why do we even tax land, right? Because we want to provide services, necessary services, but there's so many ways we can provide services, just as many other countries. But I think I go back to, if you're passing it on to, if it's those three categories and you're giving it, if you're transferring it to your family, those three categories should maintain that tax deferral. And then when you're selling it, trying to make a profit, you should pay taxes on the profit you're making.
Okay, thank you for those responses. Any other comments at this time? Okay, so any other questions from the panel? Okay, seeing no further comments or questions, Bills 265-37 and 266-37 have been duly heard. We really appreciate your attendance and participation today. The committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. May 14th. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning, which can be dropped off the mailboxes here at the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. Stuasmasi, and have a great day. We're going to do a quick recess. I believe we're running out of recording capability, so a recess at this time.